Chapter 1752. Upon hearing Zhou Wen's answer, the girl said with a faint smile, "Since you're the best teacher, you must be the most powerful existence. Then, why haven't I seen your name on the Rubik's Cube ranking?" The moment that was said, everyone looked at her. They knew that she didn't seem to be up to no good. Li Xian, who was beside Zhou Wen, frowned and wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Zhou Wen. "Lady, you're still young and lack cultural knowledge. I don't blame you," Zhou Wen said with a smile. Upon hearing Zhou Wen insinuate that she was illiterate, the girl was so infuriated that her lungs nearly exploded. She glared at Zhou Wen and said, "What did I say wrong? Please point it out." I believe many people are familiar with the names of the world's most outstanding artists, the best chess masters, and the strongest warriors. But how many people know who their teachers are? How many people know what kind of great achievements and works their teacher has? Zhou Wen continued unhurriedly. There are specializations in every field. A good teacher doesn't necessarily have to be powerful. To determine if a teacher is good enough, it depends on what kind of students he teaches. In that case, the students you teach are very impressive. I wonder which one of your students is on the Rubik's Cube ranking? Which immortal was it? Or is it that saint? The girl continued with a mocking tone. "There isn't a single human on the ranking. I wonder which alien is your student?" The people beside them glared at the girl. Now, everyone knew that she was deliberately causing trouble. However, Zhou Wen wasn't angry. He continued smiling as he looked at the girl and said, "Since you think so, why don't we make a bet?" "What bet?" the girl asked. "If my disciple's name is on the Rubik's Cube ranking, you have to sincerely acknowledge me as your master. Furthermore, you have to bow to me in front of everyone. Do you dare to bet?" Zhou Wen asked the girl. "Sure, but if you lose, I don't want you to acknowledge me as your master. I want you to kneel to me in public and acknowledge me as your master." The moment the girl said that, everyone was enraged. Zhou Wen's reputation in the city was extremely high. Ignoring Li Xian and company, even the city guard reserve members who had just passed the test wished they could pounce on the girl and slap her. The girl didn't seem to see the angry looks on their faces. She only looked at Zhou Wen with contempt. She knew very well the origins of the aliens on the rankings. It was impossible for Zhou Wen's students to be among them. "Sure." Zhou Wen waved his hand to stop the commotion and gave the girl an affirmative answer. The girl was a little surprised. She curled her lips and said, "Then please point out to me which one is your student. Don't think that you can just randomly point out one and get away with it. That's useless against me. I have ways to prove it." "I don't think there's a need for proof." Zhou Wen pointed at Ming Xiu and said to the girl, "Do you think he's my student? So what if he's your student?" The girl frowned. "Then let his name appear on the rankings," Zhou Wen said calmly. When Ming Xiu heard that, he didn't wait for Zhou Wen to say anything else. He got up and walked out. In a few steps, he had already left the square and was heading for the Rubik's Cube in the city. The girl immediately understood what Zhou Wen was up to and couldn't help but sneer. "What a good plan. I'm just afraid that your student will lose his life for nothing." Zhou Wen only smiled and didn't say anything else. He led everyone towards the Rubik's Cube. The girl and Xiao followed. Ever since the dimensional zones of the alternate worlds opened, no human had passed through the lake of fog and reached the golden apple tree. Seeing the golden apples being plucked by aliens left many humans depressed. Why hasn't anyone stepped forward to challenge the challenge at this point in time? Where are the human gods of war who usually boast of being invincible? Could it be that even human emperor is afraid? Is the dimension really that terrifying? As a young man watched the live broadcast, he posted comments to vent his dissatisfaction. Su Yi, who was hosting the program, saw many similar comments. He said with a heavy voice, "Professor Gu, there aren't many golden apples left. Do you think we humans still have a chance of plucking the golden apples?" Professor Gu pondered and said, "There have been a few famous human experts who attempted it before, but they failed to even pass through the lake of fog. From this, it can be seen how terrifying the dimensional zones are. They far exceed the dimensional zones in Earth's universe. With our current strength as a whole, I'm afraid only a few of the strongest experts have a chance of clearing the level and plucking the golden apples. However, such an existence is the most precious treasure for us humans. How can we easily take the risk? Not participating is the best choice. Could it be that even human emperor isn't very confident? So, he asked again. Impulse is the devil. Regardless of whether one is confident or not, there's no need to take the risk. Keeping a useful body will allow one to do more meaningful and valuable things in the future. Personally, I believe the human emperor and all the human experts made the right choice. As Professor Gu spoke, he suddenly saw the Rubik's Cube light up. Someone is challenging the level. It's a human. Holy sh*T. Who's that? I don't think I've seen him before. I think I have some impression of him. He's called Bright Moon Swordsman or something. Idiot, it's Tomorrow's Swordsman. He's quite famous over there, but compared to top experts like Mo, he should be much weaker. Why did he go up? Tomorrow's Swordsman? Isn't that Ming Xiu from the Ming family? I heard that he has joined a lackey of the Yin family. Why didn't Tianzhua do it himself? Why did he push him out? Isn't this sending him to his death? There was a flurry of discussion. Many people recognized Ming Xiu, but most people didn't know that he had joined Zhou Wen's faction. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Ming Xiu entered the lake of fog and floated above the lake. He was surrounded by thick fog, making it impossible to see his fingers in front of him. Tomorrow's Swordsman's Tomorrow Sword technique is rather famous, but can his Tomorrow Sword technique break through the strange fog? So he stared at the Rubik's Cube as he explained. The fog should be a kind of rule power that can be broken by non-physical attacks. No matter how good the sword technique is, it will be useless. As Professor Gu spoke, he saw Ming Xiu pull out a sword. Ming Xiu's gaze was straight ahead as he directly pulled out his sword and stabbed forward. The sword body slowly stabbed forward, and his body moved along with the sword, becoming one with the sword as he charged forward. His sword did not have a shocking momentum, nor did it have a trace of bright sword light. Instead, it was like a graceful swordswoman flying on a sword, performing some kind of artistic sword dance. End of this chapter. Chapter 1753. He didn't fall in? How did he do it? He was overjoyed as he said excitedly. The bullet screen was already in an uproar. People were discussing why Ming Xiu didn't fall into the lake. Previously, there had been human experts who had attempted to clear the level, but the moment they entered the lake of fog, they inexplicably fell into the lake and died immediately. Ming Xiu was actually able to fly above the lake of fog. This itself was already a pleasant surprise. That fellow named Ming Xiu is something. Why haven't I heard of him before? Ignorant and inexperienced. He is an expert from our East District, the famous Tomorrow Swordsman. What's there to be smug about? We haven't even left the lake of fog. People were engaged in a flurry of discussion. The names of Ming Xiu and Tomorrow Swordsman quickly spread throughout the Federation. Even many factions in the dimension were paying attention to this challenge. Ming Xiu rode on his sword, flying slowly over the misty lake. Suddenly, his posture changed. He brandished his sword, and his movements were still gentle and slow. However, there was nothing where he swung his sword. After that, Ming Xiu brandished his sword several times, but he didn't hit anything. People were baffled. What is he doing? Is he performing? Many people were puzzled. They couldn't see the meaning of brandishing the sword in such a manner. They only felt that it was like a sword dance performance. Professor Gu, who hadn't commented for a long time, seemed to understand something. He said excitedly, "Amazing, truly amazing." Professor Gu, are you illustrating? He looked at Professor Gu in puzzlement. Of course. Professor Gu continued excitedly. Tomorrow's Swordsman indeed lives up to his reputation. I have to take back what I said previously. His sword technique has already transcended the ordinary sword technique and reached an unprecedented height. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's the best sword technique I've ever seen. Professor Gu, can you please explain in detail what makes Tomorrow Swordsman's sword technique strong? He continued. In the past, many human experts have speculated about the fog lake. Most of them believe that the fog lake itself has a powerful suction force. Creatures that don't reach a certain level of strength will be sucked into the fog lake the moment they enter. However, After seeing the performance of tomorrow's swordsman, I finally understood that my previous conjectures were wrong. The Lake of Fog itself does not have any suction. What truly pulls creatures to the bottom of the lake is not the suction of the lake water, but an invisible creature, Professor Goose said seriously. Invisible creatures? He looked at the lake again in surprise, but he still didn't find anything. He said, doubtfully, if there really is a creature hiding in the lake to attack the challenger, even if it can't be seen with the naked eye, the lake should have some reaction, right? But now, it seems that there are no ripples on the surface of the lake. It is as calm as a mirror. How did that creature rush out of the water to attack the challenger? It is because there are no ripples in the lake that I was misled earlier. It was only when tomorrow's swordsman appeared that I discovered a clue. That creature in the water is an existence that can move freely in the water without affecting the water flow. But pay attention, don't look at the water surface. Pay attention to the surrounding mist when the swordsman swings his sword tomorrow. Not beside the sword, but somewhere further away from the sword. After Professor Gu's reminder, when people took a closer look, they suddenly saw something unusual. Every time Ming Xiu swung his sword, a small vortex would appear in the fog not far from where the sword was swung. If one did not look carefully, they would think that it was the airflow caused by the sword swings. However, after careful observation, the direction of the vortex and the airflow caused by the sword swings were obviously different. The more Professor Gu said, the more excited he became. Although we can't see what the creature is, every swing of tomorrow's swordsman's sword can make it retreat without a fight. It is obvious that he has sealed off the attack route of the creature. It looks like a slow sword swing, but it is exquisite and flawless judgment and sealing. This person is really too strong. I can't imagine how he did it. After Professor Gu's explanation, the average person gradually understood. The more they watched, the more they felt that Ming Xiu was indeed extremely powerful. His image in people's hearts gradually rose. I never expected there to be such a powerful swordsman among us humans. This tomorrow's swordsman is really strong and ferocious. He's many times stronger than the spokespersons of the 6 families. Look at those fellows. They don't even dare to clear the stage. He directly stormed in. From today, no, from now on, Ming Xiu is my idol. Everyone watched as Ming Xiu tore through the waves like a sword immortal and passed through the thick fog. In the distance, they could vaguely see the lake shore and the golden apple tree. They immediately became excited. Those young people grow up very quickly. Zhang Chunxiu couldn't help but sigh as he looked at the scene on the magic cube. You make it sound like you're very old. You're not much older than them, Xiao Luchuan said with a twitch of his lips. I'm not old, but my heart is old, Zhang Chunxiu said indifferently. There are benefits to being old. This world doesn't just need the courage of youth, Xiao Luchuan said. But that's the spiritual pillar that humans need, Zhang Chunxiu said. Just as Zhang Chunxiu had said, the moment Ming Xiu's feet landed on the ground, many people watching the live stream around the world cheered in unison. Although many people didn't know who Ming Xiu was at that moment, Ming Xiu seemed to be their family or even an incarnation. They felt the same joy. Ming Xiu held his sword and walked towards the golden apple tree step by step. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, he slashed at the top of one of the golden apples. When everyone thought that humans were finally about to take down the first golden apple, they heard the sound of metal clashing. The thin branch actually blocked Ming Xiu's sword without any damage. Everyone was alarmed. Previously, when they saw the aliens easily pluck the golden apples, they thought that they were easy to pluck. They never expected them to be so hard. Ming Xiu slashed at the apple stalk again and again. After slashing it more than 10 times, he was actually unable to damage it in the slightest. His forehead was already covered in sweat, and even his breathing had become very heavy. Everyone who saw this was shocked. Is the difference between humans and aliens really that great? Many humans couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. Humans are ultimately too weak. So what if they can walk to the front of the golden tree? They still can't do anything. The girl, who was originally a little worried, secretly heaved a sigh of relief when she saw this scene. She looked at Zhou Wen provocatively. Just as the girl said that, she saw Ming Xiu take 2 steps back. He didn't continue swinging his sword. He only held it with one hand and stared intently at the golden apple hanging on the branch. In the next second, Ming Xiu suddenly brandished his sword again. However, this time, his swing was even slower than before. It moved towards the golden apple on the branch inch by inch. Can such a slow sword slash down the golden apple? He asked curiously. This was also the answer that all humans wanted to know. When the blade of the sword came into contact with the tree branch, everyone felt as if they were in a trance. For some reason, the sword actually passed through the tree branch and arrived behind the golden apple. Crack! Just as everyone was wondering what had happened, the branch snapped with a crisp sound. The golden apple fell and was grabbed by Ming Xiu with one hand. Humans finally had their first golden apple. Not long after, the scene on the Rubik's Cube changed. The dimensional zone vanished and was replaced by the Rubik's Cube ranking. A new name appeared on the ranking. However, when people saw the name clearly, they widened their eyes and couldn't help but open their mouths for a long time. End of this chapter. Chapter 1754. Zhou clan's weakest disciple, Ming Xiu. What the hell is this? Madame Zhou? Which Madame Zhou? Isn't his surname Ming? Holy is it T. It can't be Zhou Wen's one, right? That a joke, right? Even Zhou Wen might not be able to reach such a level. Is this a prank? From the looks of it, Swordsman Tomorrow and Zhou Wen have a good relationship. This joke has gone too far. The Zhou clan's disciples are the weakest. When they saw Ming Xiu's name on the leaderboard, there was an uproar. This was too hard for them to accept. The first human to pluck the golden apple was actually a disciple of a young man. Not only was he a disciple, but he was also the weakest. No matter how they looked at it, he was just pretending. Coach, I'm in 9th place. Am I okay? Ming Xiu walked out with a smile. Not bad. Zhou Wen never expected Ming Xiu to leave such a name on it, but it didn't matter. He looked at the girl and said, "How is it? Is my disciple's name on the rankings now?" The young girl's expression was a bit ugly. She clenched her teeth and said, "He is clearly the representative of a sure race and uses the power of the sure race. What kind of teacher are you?" "Why? Did you eat what I just said?" Li Xian mocked. The girl's lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but she couldn't seem to say anything. "Are you unconvinced?" Zhou Wen wasn't in a hurry as he asked the girl with a smile. "Of course not. He's clearly the representative of the Ghostkin. How can he be considered your student?" The young girl was obviously unconvinced. "All right, since you're not convinced, then I'll make sure you're convinced." Zhou Wen could sense that the girl looked ordinary, but there was an extremely terrifying aura in her body. He didn't wish to push her too far, so he signaled Feng Qiuyan with his eyes. Feng Qiuyan wasn't a person who liked to waste his breath. Upon seeing Zhou Wen's gaze, he walked straight to the Rubik's Cube and activated the Rubik's Cube challenge. "This is also my student. If he leaves his name on the rankings, will you be convinced?" Zhou Wen asked with a smile. Let's talk about that after I leave my name." The young girl's mouth was very tough, but her heart was already a little weak. Zhou Wen smiled and didn't say anything else. He turned to look at the Rubik's Cube. People were still immersed in the excitement of being the first human to pluck a golden apple. Many people were discussing the meaning behind the Zhou clan's weakest disciple that Ming Xiu had left behind. Most people who knew guessed that Ming Xiu was referring to Zhou Wen. But how would the average person know that? Many people in East Borough knew that Ming Xiu had joined Guide City. As for the commoners in the other boroughs, they had never even heard of Ming Xiu's name. So how would they know where he was? Many people asked who Zhou Wen was referring to. Those who knew Zhou Wen's name immediately posted Zhou Wen's name online, as well as his relationship with Ming Xiu. "Are you serious? From what you said, that Zhou Wen is about the same age as Ming Xiu. How can he be Ming Xiu's teacher? Is this a joke?" "It must be a joke. No matter how powerful Zhou Wen is, it's impossible for him to be stronger than Ming Xiu, right?" "That's right. Ming Xiu is already a top existence among humans. How old is Zhou Wen? How can he be Ming Xiu's teacher?" While everyone was talking, they suddenly saw the Rubik's Cube light up again. F*CK Another human trying to break through. What day is it today? In the past, not a single one came up, but now there are so many of them. Who is that person? He looks unfamiliar as well. I don't know him. He's even more unfamiliar than Swordsman Tomorrow. Don't tell me he thinks that Ming Xiu has it easy and thinks that the dimensional zone is easy. He wants to take advantage of it. It was no wonder they didn't know Feng Qiuyan. Feng Qiuyan kept a much lower profile than Ming Xiu. Many people in the East District knew the name of Swordsman Tomorrow, but not many people in the East District knew Feng Qiuyan's name, much less the other districts. Professor Gu, do you know this Feng Qiuyan? As expected of a host, Su Yi was quite knowledgeable. She immediately called out Feng Qiuyan's name. However, she had only seen some information about Feng Qiuyan and knew that there was such a person. She did not know much about Feng Qiuyan's strength. If I remember correctly, this Feng Qiuyan should be from the South Sea's Feng family. Now that the South Sea has fallen, there are no humans living there. I wonder where the Feng family has moved to. Professor Gu was rather professional as he directly revealed Feng Qiuyan's origins. Do you think Feng Qiuyan has a chance to pluck the golden apple? Su, he asked again. There's definitely a chance, but it's very small. Although Swordsman Tomorrow has already explored the Lake of Fog, making it much easier for people to clear it in theory, Feng Qiuyan is too anxious. If he had more time to prepare, his chances would be much higher. This is too reckless. However, there aren't many golden apples left. It's understandable for him to be anxious. Professor Gu's words meant that Feng Qiuyan was too anxious for success and wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of it. However, just as Professor Gu finished speaking, he saw Feng Qiuyan appear above the Lake of Fog. Then, without any unnecessary movements, he drew his saber and slashed down. Boom! The saber beam slashed down like a blade of heavenly punishment, splitting the vast fog in front of him into two. The fog rolled to both sides, revealing a straight path. The saber beam didn't stop as it slashed at the lake, forcefully splitting it into two. The waves surged to both sides as though they had been separated by a divine force, leading into the distance. At the end of the path that had been sliced open by the saber beam, a divine tree with golden apples could be seen. Feng Qiuyan's body was like a stream of light as he instantly rushed to the island and landed in front of the divine tree. He drew his saber and slashed again. A golden apple was sliced off and landed in his hand. All of this happened too quickly. Everyone was still waiting to see how Feng Qiuyan would clear the level. They were completely unprepared, but Feng Qiuyan's challenge had already ended. It wasn't until the Rubik's Cube screen jumped from the dimensional zone to the Rubik's Cube ranking that people snapped to their senses. F***CK, what did I see just now? Heavens, slap me. Was I dreaming just now? He hasn't F***king woken up, right? He cleared it just like that? Where did this person come from? He's way too strong. When did such a freak appear among us humans? Who says that there aren't any experts among us humans? This Feng Qiuyan isn't inferior to any dimensional creature. The bullet screen had already gone crazy. The screen was filled with question marks. No one could believe that such an unknown young man had cleared the level in such a domineering manner. However, when they saw Feng Qiuyan's name on the ranking, not only did they go crazy, but they were also on the verge of going crazy. End of this chapter. Chapter 1755. There are only the simple words Zhou family disciple Feng Qiuyan on the ranking. It didn't have as many tricks as Ming Xiu's. It was just like Feng Qiuyan's character, simple and direct. However, these simple words made everyone feel a little crazy. If Ming Xiu had been joking previously, now that someone had used the banner of a Zhou family disciple, it made this seemingly joking title become somewhat thought-provoking. Furthermore, even if Feng Qiuyan wasn't Zhou Wen's student, he was definitely under Zhou Wen's banner like Ming Xiu. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used such a title. A human faction that wasn't very famous before suddenly had two powerhouses that could be ranked on the rankings. This was already scary enough. Furthermore, there were only two humans on this ranking. It could be said that they could look down on the entire Federation. Another Zhou family disciple. Is this for real? Is that Zhou Wen really very strong? Don't tell me they're really Zhou Wen's students. It's definitely fake. How can such a thing happen? He produced 2 calamity-grade students that can be ranked on the Rubik's Cube ranking. Unless that Zhou Wen is a god. Professor Gu, what do you think? Could Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyin really be Zhou Wen's students? Su, he said excitedly. It's hard to say, but generally speaking, no one would joke about this kind of thing. But to say that a person of their age can teach 2 such students, isn't it a little too strange? Professor Gu said ambiguously. He did not dare to confirm anything. Previously, when Ming Xiu made this name, almost no one believed it. They all thought it was just a joke. But now people were skeptical. They weren't so sure that it was a joke, but they also couldn't believe that there was such a thing. I was wondering how powerful you were. So you're another spokesperson of an alien race. He's clearly the spokesperson of the phaseless race. What's the difference between him and the previous spokesperson? Since she had already experienced it the first time, the girl clearly felt less burdened when she said such words. She spoke confidently. Zhou didn't mind. In fact, Feng Qiuyin and Ming Xiu could really be considered his disciples. In the past, Zhou didn't dare admit that he had taught Feng Qiuyin and Ming Xiu because they were extremely talented. They had to rely on themselves to figure it out. But now, Zhou could say with a clear conscience that he had indeed taught them. If Zhou hadn't raised their realms with the teacher domain and deduced their flaws and loopholes, how could they have advanced to the heaven realm so quickly? In fact, even without the girl, Zhou had spent so much effort to teach them so that they could pluck the golden apples. Making a bet with the girl was just going with the flow. Of course, Shiryu was very monstrous, but Feng Qiuyin and Ming Xiu's aptitude was sufficiently good and their comprehension was sufficiently high. Otherwise, it was impossible for there to be such a good effect. Shiryu couldn't teach a fool to become the strongest in the world. He could only guide them to develop their potential. This doesn't count? Then let's have another one, Zhou said to the girl. Could he be the representative of another clan? The young girl snorted coldly. You have such good eyesight. Does she look like the representative of any clan? Zhou pointed at Qinzhen. When the girl heard Zhou words, she sized up Qinzhen. A strange ripple flashed in her eyes, making her eyes look like an abyss filled with layers of fog. She's not the representative, the girl said with certainty as she retracted her gaze. Then, if she leaves her name on the rankings, you won't go back on your word, right? Zhou asked. Who's going back on my word? You were the one who cheated. The girl immediately retorted. Just say if she enters the rankings, will you admit defeat or not? Zhou didn't argue with her, as he said indifferently. Although the girl felt that Zhou definitely had the confidence to say so, it was already too late for her to back down. All she could do was bite the bullet and say, as long as she's really your disciple, I'll naturally admit defeat. All right, Zhou replied and turned to Qinzhen. Steady yourself. Don't be reckless. Yes. Qinzhen answered and turned to walk towards the Rubik's Cube. He activated it once again. Why? Don't you have confidence in the disciple you taught? When a girl heard Zhou's exhortations to Qinzhen, she imagined that he was worried that she wouldn't be able to clear the stage. She immediately felt a little more confident as she teased Zhou. I'm afraid she'll go too crazy, Zhou said indifferently. He really wasn't worried that Qinzhen wouldn't be able to clear the stage. Previously, he had taught Feng Qiuyin, Ming Xiu, and Qinzhen. Ming Qiuyin and Ming Xiu had their own paths, and Zhou had only played a supporting role. However, Qinzhen was different. The path she took was the path Zhou had taken. It could be said that Qinzhen had been guided by Zhou the entire way. Zhou was a man, but Qinzhen was a woman. The immortal slaying that Zhou had researched was inclined to be domineering, and Qinzhen had a particularly stubborn personality. She believed in Zhou and also believed in the path he pointed out. Therefore, she firmly followed the path Zhou pointed out. It wasn't crooked at all. However, women and men were fundamentally different. This wasn't discrimination, but a biological difference. Qinzhen wasn't flexible at all. Furthermore, as a woman, She pushed her domineeringness to an even higher level. This wasn't a mistake, nor was it a flaw. However, the result of doing so was that Qin Zhen's sword technique became extremely extreme and domineering. Clearing the stage wasn't a problem, but being too rigid was easy to break. Zhou Wen was afraid that Qin Zhen would be too extreme and take the risk to injure herself. The reason why he got Ming Xiao and Feng Shuyan to clear the stage first was to let Qin Zhen be prepared to prevent her from injuring herself by being too forceful. Victory was certain, but Zhou Wen wanted 0 casualties. He didn't need to worry about winning or losing. What's going on today? Someone is clearing the stage again? And it's a woman? He couldn't help but be surprised when he saw Qin Zhen appear on the screen. Qin Zhen was dressed in white armor with a silver visor on her face. Her legs were slender, and her figure was outstanding. Even without looking at her face, just her figure and bearing made people think that she was a beauty. Who can tell me who this woman is? She doesn't even show her face. Who can recognize her? However, she shouldn't be from the Zhou family, right? How can I not be sure? What if it's another Zhou family member? That's impossible, right? How can Guide City produce 3 experts on the rankings? Those legs, that figure. It's really amazing. With Ming Xiao and Feng Shuyan doing this, all sorts of monsters have appeared. I wonder which family she belongs to. There are quite a number of female spokespersons in the 6 families, but I don't know which one she is. Why doesn't she show her face? If she dies inside, wouldn't no one remember her? This figure, TSK. Everyone was in a flurry of discussion as they guessed where Qin Zhen came from and if she could clear the stage like Ming Xiao and Feng Shuyan. End of this chapter. Chapter 1756. Qin Zhen floated above the lake of fog. The only thing that could be seen on the Rubik's Cube screen was her. She was surrounded by endless fog. Everyone stared at the screen nervously, trying to guess whether or not the woman with the perfect figure and appearance would be able to break through the obstruction of the fog, avoid the attack of the underwater monsters, or how she would be able to clear the stage and pick the golden apple. Everyone was waiting, but as the seconds passed, Qin Zhen remained floating there without moving. It was as if the scene had been frozen. What's going on? Is the live stream stuck? Technology is getting worse and worse. She can even get stuck on such a simple live stream. I strongly condemn the incompetent officials of the Federation. What are you shouting for? Where is it stuck? Can you open your dog eyes and take a good look? The fog is still moving. It's really moving. If that's the case, why isn't she moving? Has her brain suddenly malfunctioned? Everyone looked at the live stream in puzzlement, wondering what the woman was waiting for. When Zhou Wen saw Qin Zhen standing there motionless, he couldn't help but cover his forehead with one hand. His face was filled with depression. He naturally knew what Qin Zhen was thinking, but he had clearly exhorted Qin Zhen to stay calm. Now, she was actually standing there waiting for the invisible monster in the lake to come out and kill it. Was there anything more King ridiculous than this? Finally, Qin Zhen moved. She condensed a sword and slashed at the calm lake. Kacha! Although they couldn't see what Qin Zhen's sword beam had struck, the cracking sound made it clear that she had definitely struck something and snapped it. The purple light condensed into a sword that Qin Zhen held in her hand. After the strike, the sword beams crisscrossed and slashed at the lake. Cracking sounds rang incessantly, like the sound of steel being sliced apart. Qin Zhen was like a high and mighty queen, mercilessly lashing out at the ants at the bottom. Holy *T, this woman is too fierce. She actually wants to kill the invisible monster in the lake. She won't leave, even if she can't kill it. Amazing, really amazing. She's too arrogant. She doesn't care about clearing the level at all. She's just here to kill monsters to gain experience. This woman is really unfathomable, indeed. Her figure and sword techniques are too domineering. I wonder what her face looks like. The tension from before vanished in an instant. Now, no one was worried about whether Qin Zhen could clear the level. The atmosphere became very joyous. Everyone was guessing if the woman could kill the invisible monster in the lake. There were even people who had started bets. Qin Zhen didn't let them wait too long. After a series of cracking sounds, Qin Jun suddenly became one with his sword, turned into an overbearing purple sword rainbow, and rushed into the lake in an instant. This series of actions left everyone dumbfounded. Everyone else was thinking about how to clear the instance dungeon, but this woman, instead of killing monsters, didn't leave. She actually rushed into the lake by herself. If this happened to an ordinary person, she would simply be an expert at courting death. Boom! A beam of purple sword light burst out from the lake like a pillar of light, shooting straight up into the sky. Something seemed to shatter in the sword light, making a loud sound like glass shattering. Along with that loud noise, the thick fog that shrouded the fog lake actually dissipated, revealing the clear lake water that was as clean as a mirror, as well as that strange golden fruit tree in the distance. This woman is too arrogant. She's so fierce. How is she going to get married in the future? She has the capital to be arrogant. If you have the ability, go to the Rubik's Cube and kill a monster. Your Majesty, please accept my knees and accept me as well. I'm willing to die for you, I knew it. There are many powerhouses among humans. It's just that no one was willing to stand out. Now, there are so many of them. Didn't I say that there are many powerhouses among the humans? It's just that no one was willing to stand out before. Now, there are so many of them. Amidst everyone's discussion, Qin Jun walked toward the golden fruit tree. The lake wasn't as far as he imagined. The reason why it felt so far was because of the fog. Without any suspense, Qin Jun slashed down the golden apple. Following that, the Rubik's Cube image ended and turned into the Rubik's Cube leaderboard. Mingxiu was in 9th place, while Feng Xiuyan was in 7th place. Because Qin Jun had killed the monster in the lake, her ranking was slightly higher than theirs. She was in 4th place. There wasn't much of a problem with her ranking. After all, she wasn't in 1st place. The difference in rankings behind her wasn't huge. However, when everyone saw the name on the Rubik's Cube leaderboard, they were all dumbfounded. Zhou clan's disciple, Qin Jun. It's the Zhou clan again. He's ascending to the heavens. The Zhou clan has 3 people on the leaderboard in a row. I suddenly thought of Mingxiu's title. Haha, it looks like I'm not the only one who thought of it. The Zhou clan's weakest disciple is indeed true. Feng Xiuyan and Qin Jun are indeed stronger than him. They deserve to be the weakest. That's ridiculous. The weakest disciple is ranked 9th on the leaderboard. Am I living in a dream? Mingxiu is the weakest. I wonder how many more disciples are as good at fighting as Mingxiu. Don't tell me he will pluck all the remaining golden apples today. Holy sh*t, it can't be that bad, right? I think it's fine. The 6 families are all cowards. Now, Zhou, Wen's disciple, has stepped forward to fight for us humans. This is a true human hero. I love it. Who knows how to become Zhou, Wen's disciple? I'm willing to be the weakest disciple of the Zhou clan. The words Zhou clan's disciple instantly became popular. Some people had already changed their online usernames to Zhou clan's lackey. Some even changed their usernames to Zhou clan's lackey. What do you say now? She's not a spokesperson, right? Zhou asked the girl with a smile. She's not a spokesperson, but how do I know if she was personally taught by you? Perhaps you begged her to impersonate you. The girl was still being stubborn. If a saintess of the trajectory Holy Temple were to become the disciple of a human, she would lose all her face. Since you say so, let's end the bet here, Zhou said nonchalantly. He didn't really want the girl to bow to him, nor did he really want to force her into a corner. Zhou had long recognized Xiao, who had changed her appearance. He could also roughly guess the girl's origins. When the girl heard Zhou's words, she felt energized. With the girl's logic, how could she let it go so easily if victory was already in her grasp? Yet, Zhou had let it go just like that. He was definitely feeling guilty. That Qin Jun was definitely not his disciple. Zhou was a big cheat. Don't. I've always been a man of my word. I'll definitely keep my word. As long as you can prove that she was taught by you, I'll immediately serve tea and acknowledge you as my master, the girl said arrogantly, thinking that she had caught on to Zhou. How do you want me to prove it? Zhou asked. Simple. Since she's your student, her sword techniques must have been taught by you. Show her sword techniques. If your sword techniques aren't as good as your students', Then our bet. The girl didn't finish her sentence, but her meaning was obvious. If Zhou Wen's sword techniques were inferior to Qin Jun's, she would win the bet. End of this chapter. Chapter 1757. Are you sure you want to see my sword techniques? Zhou Wen looked at the girl and asked helplessly. Of course. How can I go back on my word? If I want to bet, I'll do it to the end. The more Zhou Wen was unwilling to force the girl into a corner, the more excited she became. She believed that she had grasped Zhou Wen's weakness. All right, I hope you won't regret it. Zhou Wen had nowhere to retreat, nor did he wish to. I definitely won't regret it, the girl said firmly. Zhou Wen didn't waste any more time. With a wave of his hand, an ordinary sword appeared in his hand. What do I have to do for you to think that my sword techniques are good enough? Zhou Wen asked the girl. No, not good. It's the same as her sword techniques and better than hers. The girl corrected him and continued. How about this? Use all your strength to attack me. I'll naturally be able to tell if your sword techniques are better than hers. No. Zhou Wen shook his head. Why? Are you going back on your word? The girl mocked. Of course not. I'm just afraid that you will go back on your word after losing and refuse to admit it, Zhou Wen said. How can I, a dignified person, go back on my word? Am I that kind of person? The girl was instantly infuriated. I don't know what kind of person you are, but there were people who refused to admit it. The way Zhou Wen looked at the girl was clearly saying, Don't you know what kind of person you are? The girl originally wanted to retort, but when she thought of how she seemed to be in the wrong, the words that came to her mouth changed. What do you think I should do? Swords have no eyes. It's inevitable that there will be accidental injuries. There's no need to draw your sword. How about this? Since you have to take me as your master if you lose, I'll teach you in advance. You can use any sword technique, and I'll correct your mistakes. Zhou Wen threw the sword in his hand to the girl. You want to teach me how to use a sword? The girl caught the sword and stared at Zhou Wen with widened eyes. The corners of her eyes twitched as though she had heard something unbelievable or a terrible joke. That's right. Zhou Wen nodded with certainty. Good, very good. The girl was so angry that she laughed. She cursed inwardly. You really don't know your place. What an arrogant and ignorant human. You actually dare to shamelessly say that you want to teach me how to use the sword. I'm the saintess of the trajectory, holy temple. Can you understand my sword techniques? Then watch carefully. The girl was infuriated, but she didn't argue further. She drew her sword and slashed at Zhou Wen. Everyone was shocked by her action because her sword was too fast, and it was exactly the same as the sword technique that Qin Jun had used. There was almost no difference between them. Even Li Xian, Ming Xiu, and Feng Qiuyan's expressions changed drastically. Just by watching for a while, he was able to use Qin Jun's swordsmanship exactly the same. This was not just the same movements, but even the aura and sword intent were exactly the same. This kind of ability was simply inhuman. Or rather, this girl had long been plotting against Zhou Wen. That was why she had studied the sword technique that Zhou Wen had handed to Qin Jun so thoroughly. No matter which possibility it was, this young girl did not come with good intentions. Zhou Wen wasn't surprised when he saw the girl's ability. Instead, he confirmed her identity. When he saw the girl and Xiao, Zhou Wen had roughly guessed that she was from the Six Temples. Now, he was basically certain that the girl was from the trajectory, holy temple like Xiao. With Shiryu's help, Zhou Wen could see more clearly than the average person. It wasn't an exact copy, but a copy. This wasn't something that had been trained, but replicated. Only the trajectory holy temple, which studied the power of trajectories, was good at such things. The sword in the girl's hand slashed at Zhou Wen in an extremely domineering manner. The flashing sword beams crisscrossed like lightning and cracks, enveloping Zhou Wen's entire body. It left anyone who saw it shuddering in fear. However, Zhou Wen remained motionless. Even when the girl retracted her sword and retreated, he didn't move his toes. Zhou Wen wasn't afraid, but the people watching from the side were so nervous that their palms were covered in sweat. If the girl's sword had tilted a little, Zhou Wen's head would have been gone. Thankfully, such a thing didn't happen. Zhou Wen was safe and sound. Aren't you afraid that I'll chop off your head? Looking at the motionless Zhou Wen, there was a hint of surprise in the girl's eyes. She felt that this person was rather bold. Why should I be afraid? Didn't we agree? It's just guidance, not a duel. You won't hurt me, so what's there to be afraid of? Zhou said calmly. Zhou naturally didn't think so. He wasn't dodging because he was confident that the girl couldn't hurt him. He only said that to hold the girl back with his words, hoping that she wouldn't turn hostile if she lost. The girl was still a little naive, so she never expected Zhou to be so cunning. She thought that although Zhou wasn't much of a person, he was still trustworthy. You're done reading the sword art. Now, please correct me. The girl threw the sword back to Zhou and said to him with a faint smile. She had replicated Qin Zhen's sword art without any mistakes. She still wanted to prove if Zhou had taught Qin Zhen the sword art. At this level of sword art, words can no longer describe it. It's called teaching by example. I'll show it to you once. You will naturally know where you went wrong after seeing it. Zhou's words infuriated the girl. It was as though she had already lost and had to take Zhou as her master. However, there was no time for the girl to retort. The sword in Zhou's hand had already slashed down at her, domineering and resolute. If Qin Zhen's domineeringness was like an empress of the mortal world, having an irresistible and supreme authority, then Zhou's strike would be unreasonable and domineering. The immortal pinched his fingers and divined. This treasure is fated with me. All of you step down. The immortal pinched his fingers and divined again. You are fated to die. This immortal will uphold justice on behalf of the heavens and slay you today. When an emperor killed someone, he would at least find a groundless crime. As for this immortal form, there was no need for any reason. He was the will of the heavens. If he said you deserve to die, you deserve to die. Such domineeringness was something mortals could only dream of, but they would never be able to achieve it. Such domineeringness wasn't Zhou's sword intent. His sword intent was even more resolute. Immortal slaying, immortal slaying. Regardless of whether you were an immortal or a heavenly being, I could slay you with a single strike. This was the tyrant of tyrants. If you were domineering, I would be even more domineering than you. Your father was your father. There was no room for negotiation when he beat you up. The girl had originally made up her mind to remain motionless like Zhou to showcase her elegance. She was good at the power of trajectories. If Zhou wanted to harm her, she could determine the trajectory the moment he attacked. It wouldn't be too late to dodge then. However, when Zhou slashed out, the girl was alarmed to discover that she couldn't predict the trajectory of the strike. She couldn't be sure if the strike would eventually slash at her. The girl's face immediately revealed a look of panic. The completely unpredictable trajectory threw the girl, who was used to having an omniscient view, into chaos. Zhou's originally gentle image suddenly became as terrifying as a ghost in her eyes. The domineering sword seemed to become Death's scythe, about to reap her beautiful and alluring life. In her panic, the girl couldn't help but take a step back. End of this chapter. Chapter 1758. Although it was only a small step, the girl's faith had already wavered. What was even more fatal was that after taking this small step back, the girl realized that the tip of Zhou's sword couldn't touch her body. If she didn't move, the tip of the sword would only sweep past her. This discovery broke down the girl's psychological defense even more, instantly causing her expression to become a little embarrassed. It was a kind of anger and shame that came from being toyed with. Just as she had expected, Zhou's strike swept past her as though it was mocking her. The further the sword tip was from her, the uglier the girl's expression became. Many of the new city guard members who were watching the battle booed. The girl had slashed so many times beside Zhou, but he had stood there motionless. Many times, the blade had brushed past Zhou's cheek. Now, Zhou had only slashed once and was still so far from the girl, but she had retreated. Clearly, she wasn't confident enough. How's this strike of mine? Is it worthy of teaching such a student? Zhou unsheathed his sword and said calmly to the girl. The girl looked at Zhou and her lips moved, but she couldn't say a word. She could naturally tell that the realm and level of Zhou's strike were far above Qin Zhen's. Even she couldn't see its trajectory. Such a level was probably only achievable by the powerhouses of the various races in the dimension. For a human to be able to cultivate his sword art to such a level, it could be said that he was infinitely close to the realm of those apocalyptic bigwigs. He could even match them. The girl couldn't imagine how Zhou had done it. The girl knew very well that it was impossible for humans to reach the apocalyptic stage. She couldn't even find anyone who could approach them. Zhou's sword art realm clearly far exceeded his level. In fact, the girl had overestimated Zhou's realm. Zhou's immortal slaying was indeed very strong, and his realm was indeed very high. While teaching Qinjun, Shiryu's feedback had given Zhou a deeper understanding of immortal slaying. The teaching process was also a process of self-growth, allowing him to reach the realm of immortal slaying. The current immortal slaying realm was indeed close to the realm of many Armageddon-level big shots, but there was still a long way to go. The reason why the girl had such a feeling was also thanks to Shiryu. When the girl demonstrated her sword technique, Shiryu had already analyzed her. It was through this analysis that he gained a certain understanding of her trajectory and strength. Only then could he target her with his sword, allowing him to achieve better results. The Heaven Realm Sure Domain was undoubtedly a godly technique. The way the girl looked at Zhou no longer had the contempt from before. The girl was already in existence infinitely close to the apocalypse stage. She was also the existence closest to advancing to the apocalypse stage in the past thousands of years in the trajectory Holy Temple. From her point of view, Zhou was already qualified to be compared to her, at least in terms of sword techniques. "Miss, what are you waiting for? Quickly come over and acknowledge me as your master. It's your good fortune to be able to become my brother's disciple," Li Xian mocked. "That's right, young lady. Quickly acknowledge me as your master. It's really your good fortune to be able to become City Lord Zhou's disciple. If you miss this opportunity, there won't be another one." That's right, that's right. How many people can only dream of becoming City Lord Zhou's disciple? You have profited from a disaster. Everyone jeered, causing the girl's face to turn livid and pale. She looked like she would explode at any moment. At that moment, Xiao stood forward and coughed lightly. City Lord Zhou's sword techniques are indeed rare. This lady's sword techniques aren't inferior either. Why don't we consider this but a draw? Xiao knew very well that if the girl really went berserk without a care for anything, Guide City would probably be flooded with blood, even if Zhou won and company were safe and sound. Just as Xiao said that, the girl suddenly looked up and glared at Zhou. She enunciated each word clearly. "If I dare to acknowledge you as my master, do you dare to accept?" Zhou originally didn't think much of it, since he knew that the girl wasn't human, but an alien from the trajectory Holy Temple. He wasn't in the mood to take in an alien student, much less teach her anything. It was to prevent her from becoming a scourge for humanity in the future. When Xiao spoke, Zhou had already planned on letting it go. However, with the girl's provocation, Zhou didn't wish to let her off. "Why wouldn't I dare accept?" Zhou asked indifferently. "All right, then I'll acknowledge you as my master. I hope you won't regret it in the future." With that said, the girl took a step forward and knelt in front of Zhou. She said loudly, "Master, please accept 3 bows from your disciple." By the side, Zhao's expression changed drastically. He wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. Without another word, the young girl knelt down. The moment her forehead touched the ground, the color of the sky suddenly changed. The originally clear sky instantly became grotesque and motley. The sky seemed to turn into a kaleidoscope as it was split into pieces. The clouds and the sun seemed to become countless after being refracted by the kaleidoscope. The sky was strange, beautiful, and resplendent. Instantly, everyone was dumbfounded. Looking up at the strange sky, Zhao's expression turned abnormally odd. Zhou was also looking at the strange scene in the sky. The Sure Domain wasn't that large, so it was unable to envelop the entire sky. Naturally, he didn't know what was going on. However, Zhou could vaguely sense a strange energy fluctuation from the girl's body. However, the power was extremely strange. It wasn't metal, wood, water, fire, or earth. nor was it space, time, or matter. It was somewhat similar to Wang Lu's power, but there were also some differences. Do you still dare to make me continue kowtowing? The girl knelt in front of Zhou Wan, her eyes filled with mockery. Why don't you continue kowtowing? Didn't you say you wanted to kowtow 3 times? Zhou Wan said calmly. Master, please accept a second bow from your disciple. The girl was rather straightforward as she kowtowed once again. This kowtow caused the kaleidoscope-like sky to shatter like glass. Behind the kaleidoscope-like luster was an extremely black abyss. Instantly, it went from extreme brightness to extreme darkness. All of Guide City instantly fell into absolute darkness. It was pitch black, but it was difficult to distinguish objects even though they were just inches away. The residents of Guide City fell into a state of panic. In fact, it wasn't only Guide City. Everywhere in the world was in a state of panic. No one knew what was happening. Master, please accept a third bow from your disciple. Only the girl's voice echoed in the darkness. Her figure couldn't be seen, but the sound of her forehead touching the ground could be heard. After this sound, a white beam of light descended from the extremely dark sky. It was unimaginably fast, as though it had always been there. From a moment it was discovered to the moment it landed on Zhou Wan, there seemed to be a gap in time and space. It made it impossible for anyone to dodge. Chapter 1759. In a palace that resembled a primordial universe, a terrifying existence suddenly opened its eyes. Its gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the distant stars. What happened? Why would the unnamed god be triggered? Could it be that something happened to the tracker? With a thought, the terrifying existence produced strange ripples on its body. The ripples interweaved into a complicated net, as though countless ropes of fate were trembling. Moments later, the terrifying existence revealed a strange look. It was unable to divine the trajectory of fate related to the tracer. However, it could vaguely sense that the tracer had not encountered any life-threatening danger. Sacred Lord, what happened? The creature that guarded the terrifying existence asked in surprise. It looked like a turtle and a snake. The tracer saint must have encountered something, but I can't find the trajectory of fate connected to her. The Sacred Lord of Trajectory said in deep thought. How is that possible? Given your relationship with the saintess, even if she's on Earth and is shielded by the rules, you should be able to pry into the trajectory of fate connected to her. Could it be that the nomological powers of Earth have become stronger? The monster said in horror. What should we do? If something happens to the saintess, wouldn't your plan? It's fine. If she's really in danger, I'll be able to sense it no matter how the rules of Earth shield her. The saintess isn't in danger now, but I can't divine the trajectory related to her. The Sacred Lord of Trajectory seemed to be thinking about something. Could it be that the other Sacred Lords have discovered the secret on the saintess and want to kill her? No, I have to rush to Earth personally. I can't let them succeed no matter what. As the turtle spoke, it crawled out of the cave beneath the throne. Black flames burned on its snake-like head, forming a strange vortex. Don't panic. The nomological restrictions on Earth haven't been completely removed. They don't have the guts to head to Earth now. Even if they do, they won't be able to unleash the power of the apocalypse. How will they be able to kill the Tracer? The Sacred Lord of Trajectory said. That's true. The Saintess has the power of 6 sages. She's an unparalleled, perfect existence. Once she advances to the apocalypse level, even the strongest immortal emperor of the immortals back then might not be a match for her. Those old fellows are nothing to her. Only then did the turtle recall what kind of existence the Saintess was. It was no longer in a hurry to rush to Earth to rescue her. I wonder what in the world happened to trigger the unnamed deity. Sacred Lord Trajectory continued to frown as he tried to derive more information. However, no matter how much he tried, he couldn't obtain any more relevant information. The unnamed divinity has been triggered. Doesn't that mean that the Saintess is in great danger? No, I have to go there myself. I cannot let anything happen to the Saintess. The tortoise snake grew excited again. If you can't even find the unnamed god, it's useless even if you rush over now. Holy Lord Trajectory, stop Turtle Snake once again. Lord Sacred Lord, you've planned this for countless years. If something happens to the Sacred Lady, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to find an existence that possesses the bloodline of the 6 sacred clans. It'll be difficult to sign a contract with the unnamed god, said the tortoise snake. Of course, Sacred Lord Trajectory knew that it was impossible for a second tracing mark to appear. He had schemed for countless years before obtaining the top bloodline of the 6 sacred races and fusing it with tracing mark. It was impossible to replicate a second existence. Furthermore, the unnamed god had already agreed to tracing mark. It was impossible for a second tracing mark to form a contract. It's fine. With the unnamed god's contract protecting her, no one can take her life even if tracing mark is on Earth. At most, she'll suffer some physical pain. Her temperament isn't stable yet. It's good for her to be tempered. Sacred Lord Trajectory stopped trying to derive what had happened. Instead, he tried his best to conceal the trajectory of fate related to tracing mark in case the other sacred lords or terrifying existences of the immortals discovered the abnormality of tracing mark. The unnamed god wasn't a true god, but to the 6 sacred races, it was an existence even more terrifying than a true god. Back then, the immortals reigned supreme. The 6 sacred races were far from being a match for the immortals. They were still at the level of underlings. However, they had secretly formed an alliance and tried everything they could to overthrow the rule of the immortals. One of their plans was called the Unnamed God. They used the strongest powers of the 6 races to create an ultimate weapon. The weapon's power was enough to easily kill an apocalyptic existence. When the Unnamed God was born, the 6 sacred races were overjoyed. They believed that they could rely on the unnamed God's power to overthrow the rule of the immortals and usher in a new era that belonged to the 6 sacred races. However, they soon realized that they had rejoiced too early. No one had been able to use the unnamed God. Back then, the top experts of the 6 races had attempted to control the unnamed God, but none of them had succeeded. There was even an apocalyptic expert who had been too stubborn. In the end, he angered the unnamed God and was killed. Later on, they realized that because the unnamed God was the fusion of the 6 races' strongest powers, no expert from any of the 6 races could match the unnamed God perfectly. Only a sacred body with the perfect bloodline of the 6 races could truly control the unnamed God. However, such an existence was believed to be impossible. Therefore, after the unnamed God was created, it was never used. Later on, the immortals collapsed for no reason. The 6 sacred races took advantage of the situation and became the new overlords of the dimension. They didn't use the unnamed God at all. After becoming the new overlords of the dimension, it was difficult for the 6 sacred races to be as united as before. It was even more difficult to produce a perfect sacred body. Even the 6 sacred races didn't wish for the unnamed God to be controlled by someone. However, the Holy Lord of the Trajectory sect did not give up on this idea. He had spent a great deal of effort in the dark and had set up an unimaginable long-term scheme. Under a series of coincidences, the tracing path was finally born, and he formed a contract with the unnamed God. However, as Tracer hadn't advanced to the apocalyptic stage, she was too weak and hadn't truly used the unnamed God's powers. However, with the unnamed God's power, even leaving a contract mark on her was enough to protect Tracer's life. Therefore, Holy Lord Trajectory wasn't too worried about Tracer's safety. What he wanted to know more was who had blocked the path of fate related to Tracer. Did someone already know of the existence of Tracer's perfect sacred body? After completing the shielding, Holy Lord Trajectory's gaze pierced through endless space-time and landed on the gigantic statue in the 6 races' forbidden zone. The statue looked like a ghost, a demon, a Buddha, and a sage. However, upon closer inspection, it was no different from a human's body. However, there was a vertical mark at its glabella. That was where the unnamed God was. Now, the vertical mark emitted a demonic white light. It was like a vertical eye of white electricity that was glaring angrily at a certain spot in the void. Into this chapter. Chapter 1760. The strange white light descended from the sky as though there was no process at all. It landed on Zhou Wen, leaving him no space to dodge. Ignoring Zhou Wen's current speed, even if he was 10 or 100 times faster, it would be difficult for him to dodge the white light that appeared out of thin air. Zhou Wen didn't panic. Now, he was no longer the weakling who didn't know anything and was always on tenterhooks. He already had his own knowledge framework in mind, allowing him to analyze and judge all kinds of unknown powers. For a power that directly affected his body and couldn't be dodged, it was impossible for it to be a power that directly killed him. It was even very likely that it wasn't a damaging skill. Indeed, when the white light landed on Zhou Wen, it didn't harm his body, but it instantly made him feel as though a mountain was pressing down on him. His legs trembled nonstop as his knees involuntarily bent. In an instant, Zhou Wen knew what power it was. He had guessed half of it. It was indeed not a power that directly killed him, but it would still injure his body. He was too familiar with such power. He had seen it countless times. It was a power similar to the Sigh of the King. No, to be precise, it was similar to the power of the strange woman who had used the Sigh of the King to reside in his body. As the woman didn't have a corporeal body, she naturally couldn't control a corporeal power. This white light was the same as the woman in the Sigh of the King. They were all pure consciousness. In this world, consciousness was the most mysterious thing. Even at Zhou Wen's level, it was impossible for him to turn his consciousness into a corporeal body. He couldn't even use his consciousness to control a piece of paper to fly. No matter how powerful his will was, he could only control his own body and not affect others. The other skills that seemed to be using willpower to control power were just willpower controlling some kind of power in the body. They were not purely using willpower. Just like the sword will, the sword will was a mixture of sword power and willpower. It was not pure willpower. This kind of sword will could only affect the opponent's willpower, but it could not cause actual damage. However, Zhou Wen had seen 2.5 people who could directly turn consciousness into a corporeal body and use it on external objects. One was the woman from the Sigh of the King, and the other was this white beam of light. The reason why there was still half of it was because Zhou Wen wasn't sure if the person was using pure consciousness. That half was the arch. She could make wishes come true. Zhou Wen believed that the wish itself was a form of consciousness, but he wasn't sure if it was, so it could only be considered half. This white beam of light's consciousness wasn't weaker than the Sigh of the King that Zhou Wen had seen. It was even stronger. It crossed space and was actually able to force his legs to bend, making him almost kneel to the ground. An existence with this consciousness was unimaginably powerful. Are all experts at the apocalypse stage so terrifying? Zhou Wen was alarmed. He had already used all his strength, but his knees were still rapidly plummeting to the ground. In fact, not all apocalyptic grades possess this level of willpower, or it could be said that creatures that could achieve this level of willpower were extremely rare among the apocalyptic grades. The toughness of one's will and the materialization of one's consciousness were on completely different levels. No matter how strong Zhou Wen's willpower was, he couldn't stop his legs from bending. Seeing Zhou Wen's legs bend, Tracing thought to herself, "I'm afraid you won't be able to accept my bow if you want to be my teacher." Tracing naturally knew very well that a weapon like the unnamed god, which was almost like a god, had an extremely high pride. How could it tolerate its contractor lowering its head and kneeling to any other creature? After 3 bows, Zhou Wen was already a dead man in Tracing's eyes. "I gave you a chance. You were the one who chose to be my disciple. Don't blame me for your death. However, it's not a waste for you to die under the power of the unnamed god. If it's not in existence at the apocalypse stage, the unnamed god won't even have any reaction." With this thought in mind, Tracing still felt a little uncomfortable. She originally didn't have any killing intent, but she had been forced into such a state. She had only bowed out of anger. Looking at Zhou when he was about to kneel, she thought to herself, don't ever think of being someone else's teacher in your next life, much less think of being my tracing's teacher. Li Xian, Feng Qiuyan, Ming Xiu, and Qin Zhen, who were close to Zhou Wen, were all top humans with combat strength. However, just the aftermath of the white light left them rooted to the ground. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't move at all. It wasn't just them. In fact, everyone in Guide City was immobilized. The humans with weaker strength and willpower were pressed to the ground. Feng Qiuyan, Ming Xiu, and company tried their best to resist the force, but their knees had already fallen to the ground. Even with their hands pressed against the ground, it was still difficult for them to resist. Their bodies were about to collapse to the ground. Li Xian stood motionless, refusing to bend his legs. His bones cracked as the broken bones pierced through his flesh. Qin Zhen propped herself up with her sword, forcing herself not to kneel. However, the sword was quickly pressed into the ground. Her body quickly approached the ground, and she had no choice but to lie down. What kind of existence was the unnamed god? If its contractor knelt on the ground, how could the others remain standing? Not to mention standing, they couldn't even kneel. If tracing knelt, everyone could only prostrate themselves. And this was only the aftermath of the willpower. Zhou Wen, who was facing the willpower head-on, had yet to touch the ground with his knees. His strength and willpower far exceeded everyone else's, but it was still insufficient to resist the force. Tracing closed her eyes. She had already expected the outcome and didn't wish to see Zhou Wen's tragic state of being completely destroyed by the willpower. Tracing closed her eyes, waiting for the sound of bones snapping and blood splattering. However, after waiting for a while, all she heard was the sound of the people beside her slamming into the ground. She didn't hear the sound of Zhou Wen's knees hitting the ground, nor did she hear the sound of bones snapping as she had imagined. Could it be that he suffered the wrath of the unnamed god head-on? His body was completely reduced to ashes before he even hit the ground? Tracing couldn't help but open her eyes to look at Zhou Wen. In the next second, when Tracing saw him clearly, her eyes couldn't help but widen as though she had seen a ghost. Her face was filled with shock and disbelief. Zhou Wen hadn't been reduced to ashes as she had imagined, nor had he knelt to the ground like she had imagined. Zhou Wen was standing there perfectly fine. His knees, which had been slightly bent previously, were now straight. It wasn't only his knees. Even his spine was straight. Even his head was held high without any signs of depression. Zhou Wen stood there straight as he stared into the void with his head raised, like a king bathed in holy light. In a chapter. Chapter 1761. Zhou Wen stared into the void, but in fact, he couldn't see anything. What he was really looking at was the sigh of the King Life Providence, or rather, the woman who only existed in the Life Providence. With Zhou Wen's strength, he was indeed unable to withstand the unknown god's consciousness. It was the power of the sigh of the king that had withstood the terrifying consciousness. How could an existence that had once stood at the pinnacle of power and had all races submit to him tolerate kneeling to others? Others couldn't see it, nor could Zhou Wen, but he could sense that a woman's phantom seemed to overlap with his body. She was staring into the void as though she was looking at something. Zhou Wen, are you afraid? A woman's voice sounded in Zhou Wen's mind. The voice was clearly very beautiful, but it had an indescribable sense of authority. It made it difficult to associate the word pleasant with it. What's there to be afraid of? Zhou Wen didn't say a word as he only had this thought in his mind. However, the owner of the voice seemed to know what Zhou Wen was talking about. The owner of this consciousness is an extremely powerful existence. Even the leaders of the 6 races will find it difficult to fend him off. To kill you, he only needs a thought, the woman continued. What are you? Zhou Wen didn't answer the question of whether he was afraid or not. He was more interested in knowing what kind of existence the woman in his life providence was. In the past, he had felt that there was something wrong with his life providence. Now that the life providence could speak to him, it made him even more uneasy. There was another consciousness in his body that knew everything about him. It even knew what he was thinking. This made him feel as though he had stripped naked and stood in front of a stranger. He didn't feel safe at all. "I am you." The woman's answer left Zhou when somewhat confused. He didn't know what she meant. The woman didn't continue answering Zhou Wen's questions. Instead, she continued, "That existence is extremely terrifying. Not to mention on Earth, even in the dimension, he's a supreme existence. Making his contractor kneel in front of you is equivalent to insulting him. He definitely won't let you live in this world. Are you afraid?" Yes, Zhou Wen was indeed afraid. Anyone who was targeted by an existence that could kill them with a thought would be unable to eat or sleep in peace. There was nothing to hide. Furthermore, he couldn't hide it from a woman who knew what he was thinking. Although that existence is extremely terrifying, it has a fatal weakness. Without a contractor, it can't leave the dimension, nor can it sense the information on Earth. Now, you have two choices. One is to kill the girl in front of you. As long as you kill her, due to the suppression of Earth's laws, that existence will no longer be able to sense the internal information of Earth. Naturally, it will no longer be able to use its consciousness to kill you, the woman said. "What's the second path?" Zhou Wen asked. "The second option is to not kill the girl. I can temporarily block his consciousness lock on you," the woman said. "It sounds like the first path is easier." Zhou Wen changed the topic and continued. "You don't seem to have finished saying something. That existence isn't a living creature, or rather, not entirely a living creature. It should be a weapon." The woman slowly said, "It's not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a weapon similar to what you humans call companion beasts. It's a weapon with its own life and consciousness. However, no matter what kind of weapon it is, as long as it's a weapon, it needs a host to use it. However, a weapon like it has extremely harsh requirements for its host. It's almost impossible to find another existence like the girl in the dimension. In that case, as long as I kill her, I can be done with it once and for all." Zhou Wen pondered. At the very least, it's impossible for an existence like the girl to appear in the near future. Even if such an existence appears in the future, it will be many years later. With a human's lifespan, I'm afraid it won't be able to live to that day. "It's considered done for you once and for all," the woman said indifferently. "In that case, why did you mention the second path? The second path shouldn't be as simple as you say, right?" Zhou Wen pondered. "The girl can live on. After she advances to the apocalypse, she will be able to use that weapon and release it. Only then will you have a chance to snatch that weapon." "How do I snatch it?" "Lost Immortal Sutra. With the Lost Immortal Sutra, as long as you defeat the girl with that weapon, you can snatch the weapon for yourself. However, this is very dangerous. The girl's talent far exceeds yours. After advancing to the apocalypse stage, she will be an extremely powerful existence. Coupled with the power of that weapon, no one in the dimension can match her. If you want to defeat her and snatch that weapon, it's equivalent to sending yourself to your death. In that case, why should I snatch it?" Zhou Wen frowned. "Because Earth doesn't have time." The woman continued. "The reason why he can descend his consciousness onto Earth and kill you is because he's extremely powerful and has a contractor here to provide him with a location. But ultimately, it's because the laws and restrictions on Earth are already very weak. In a few years, the extremely terrifying existences of the dimension will descend on Earth. When that happens, even if humans aren't wiped out, they will probably be reduced to slaves. Only by obtaining that weapon will you be able to storm into the dimension and suppress all the races before Earth completely breaks out, preventing humanity from being wiped out. What you said is contradictory. I can even defeat the girl with that weapon." "Do I still need that weapon?" Zhou Wen could tell that something was amiss. "There's no contradiction. You only have one chance. That is to enter the dimension. When she advances to the apocalypse stage and obtains that weapon, use the short period of time between the two to sneak attack and defeat her when she can't fully unleash the weapon's might. No matter how powerful a weapon is, it ultimately needs its host to use it." The woman said indifferently. "However, it's too difficult. You have to enter the dimension alone and find the girl when she releases that weapon. You also have to defeat an expert who can almost reach the peak of the apocalypse. It can be said that there's no chance of survival." There's no chance of survival. Since there's no chance, why should I take this path? Zhou frowned. Of course, you don't have to choose. With your abilities, even if Earth completely breaks out, you might be able to find a place to hide in the universe. It shouldn't be a problem for you to survive, the woman said indifferently. You can live the first life. The second path is to give you and humanity a miracle. It's up to you to decide. Chapter 1762. Live on or create a miracle. What will you choose? The woman's voice echoed in Zhou mind. I choose to live on and create a miracle, Zhou said calmly. The woman had given Zhou a framework, but Zhou didn't believe that this framework was an inescapable rule. The two paths were only paths set by the woman herself. Why should he choose according to the paths set by the woman? The two paths the woman mentioned weren't the best choice for Zhou. Live on or create a miracle. You can only choose one. There's no third path, the woman said. That's your path, not mine, Zhou said. Oh, then tell me, what's your path? The woman asked. Nothing is absolute in my path. Be it the girl or that weapon. They won't become necessary existences for me, Zhou said. You mean that you won't snatch that weapon if you don't kill the girl? The woman frowned. No, I'll do my best to snatch that weapon, but even if I can't obtain it, it's not a dead end for me, Zhou said firmly. Make it clearer, the woman pressed. As long as I'm not dead, there's no end to my world, Zhou said word by word. There's no end? The woman ruminated over Zhou's words as her voice gradually turned strange. Even such a supreme existence isn't the end for you. Do you still want to become an existence that surpasses him? It's true that ignorance is bliss. I'm afraid you don't know what kind of existence it is, but I like it. Then let me see where your end is. Following the woman's voice, the willpower on her body rose abruptly, gushing out like a volcano eruption. Tracing looked at Zhou with an odd expression. Zhou had been standing in the middle of the corporeal white light for a few seconds, but he remained composed as though he wasn't injured at all. As for the humans beside him, powerful existences like Feng, Qiuyan, and Ming Xiao, they were already prostrating on the ground, unable to move. How is this possible? He can actually withstand the will of the unnamed god. Tracing found it unbelievable. In the next second, her eyes reflected the brilliance of fireworks, causing Tracing's eyes to widen to their limits. Boom! It was as though an invisible force spewed out from Zhou's body. The white light that enveloped him shattered and scattered like fireworks before vanishing. The terrifying white pillar of light seemed to have been pierced from the bottom to the top by a sharp blade. It collapsed in an instant, turning into flowing light that scattered in all directions before finally disappearing. The will of the unnamed god has actually been defeated. Seeker almost couldn't believe his eyes. In the resplendent white stream of light, Zhou's figure was like a ghost. It was as though Seeker's eyes were covered in a layer of fog. He couldn't see clearly no matter how hard he tried. As the white pillar of light dissipated, the extremely dark sky returned to normal, no longer as strange as it was before. The pressure on the guide city residents, who had been suppressed to the ground, vanished as they stood up. He looked up at Zhou in a daze, unable to snap back to his senses for a long time. In the dimension, Holy Lord Trajectory's pupils constricted as a look of horror that he hadn't seen in thousands of years appeared on his face. In the forbidden area of the Six Clans, the stone statue's white vertical eye suddenly exploded. In an instant, the white light disappeared, and the crack returned to its previous appearance. On both sides of the vertical crack, there were many small cracks that spread out like a spider's web. The unnamed god's consciousness actually suffered a backlash. This is impossible. How can there be such a terrifying life form on Earth? Could it be that the immortal's disappearance on Earth was because Holy Lord Trajectory's mind wavered as he momentarily lost control of himself? Zhou retracted his gaze and looked at the kneeling Seeker. He thought to himself, what do you mean by that weapon is a supreme existence? Isn't it clearly inferior to you? What exactly are you? Why did you become my life providence? Where did the lost immortal sutra come from? As he thought of this, he didn't receive any response from the woman. The sigh of the king life providence had already converged, and there was no more movement. It was as though it was dead silent. Suddenly, Zhou thought of something. Ever since he obtained the sigh of the king life providence, no matter how powerful an existence was, they couldn't make him kneel. Only once had he knelt. Back then, Zhou believed that demonic neonate's combination with the Swana was too powerful, causing the sigh of the king to not react. But from the looks of it, he had underestimated the sigh of the king's strength. The reason he had knelt wasn't because the woman knew that she couldn't stop Zhou from kneeling, so she didn't appear. Based on the woman's performance in destroying the consciousness, it was probably a matter of a thought for her to kill demonic neonate who had the Swana. Could it be? Zhou thought of a possibility as his expression turned odd. If it wasn't because demonic neonate and the Swana were too powerful, there was only one possibility left. There was a reason why Zhou had to kneel. Even the sigh of the king didn't have a reason to stop him. This reason could be that corpse. After some thought, Zhou could only think of this possibility. Apart from the corpse, he really couldn't think of anything nearby that could make the sigh of the king not react to his kneeling. Are you really a human? Tracing's voice interrupted Zhou's thoughts. She looked at Zhou with a confused look in her eyes. Ever since she was young, the Holy Lord of Trajectory had instilled in Tracing that the unnamed God was an invincible existence. Once she truly grasped the unnamed God, she would be able to rule the world. Even if that immortal were to revive, she didn't believe that she would lose. However, the unnamed God's consciousness had been destroyed. This completely overturned her worldview, causing her confidence in herself and the unnamed God to waver. Since you have already acknowledged me as your master, you have to abide by the rules. In the future, you have to call me teacher, understand? Zhou said indifferently as he looked at Tracing. Tracing's faith wavered, and she was momentarily unable to think of a retort to Zhou. All she did was look at him in a daze, as though she had tacitly agreed to it. Suddenly, the Rubik's Cube emitted a glow. Another creature had attempted the challenge. Zhou turned his head and realized that it was another human. Furthermore, he was rather familiar with this person. A white robe was casually draped over his body, revealing a fair and sturdy chest. His long hair casually draped over his shoulders, and a sheathed longsword casually rested on his shoulder. He gave off a lazy and wild feeling, as if he wasn't here to challenge the trial, but to bask in the sun on a vacation. End of this chapter. Chapter 1763. What's Zhongzia up to? Zhou frowned slightly. Zhongzia had always been at odds with the dimension. Others wanted to become guardians or spokespersons, but his organization was hunting guardians and spokespersons. This time, he actually took the initiative to use his true appearance to challenge the level. Wasn't he afraid that the dimension would target him? Zhongzia and Jiangyan were polar opposites. Jiangyan was willing to come into contact with the dimension, but Zhongzia believed that guardians and spokespersons of other races were no different from traitors. They could be killed quickly. Zhou wasn't that extreme. There are also two types of guardians and spokespersons that should be killed and those that shouldn't be killed. They couldn't be lumped together. Seeing another human clear the level, everyone immediately became excited. With so many humans clearing the level in a row, the haze that had enveloped their hearts for days suddenly cleared up. They were all discussing who this person was. Not many people had seen Zhongzia's true appearance, but many people knew the name Ya. However, they couldn't connect you with Zhongzia. Zhongzia wasn't like the previous challengers. He didn't fly in the air, but instead landed on the surface of the lake. Only then did people realize that he wasn't wearing any shoes. His bare white feet stepped on the surface of the lake, causing slight ripples to appear on the surface. This man is so beautiful. Many women, and even men watching the live stream, couldn't help but have such a thought flash through their minds. Ming Xiao and Feng Shuyan were undoubtedly rare handsome men, but their handsomeness more or less had some traces of youth. As for Zhongzia, although he wasn't old, he had an indescribable manly beauty. Wild, mature, sexy, and even a little charming. Just by standing there, he made people feel a kind of restless hormone pulsate. To exaggerate a little, if he were a cat, just by passing by would be enough to make a female cat in heat by the roadside urinate. He was beautiful, but not soft, seductive, but not gorgeous. Furthermore, he had a strong, dangerous aura. Many women couldn't move their eyes away just from a glance. He drew his sword. Just as everyone was admiring Zhongzia's face, Zhongzia pulled out the sword on his shoulder. It opened and closed in a leisurely manner. It was fast but not chaotic, allowing people to see it clearly. However, when they took a closer look, the sword had already returned to its scabbard. It was still casually placed on his shoulder. Many people didn't understand what Zhongzia was doing with his casual strike. He grew too quickly. Zhou sighed softly. In the past, Zhongzia's sword techniques were as wild as a demon's. Zhou found such sword techniques very powerful, but he didn't find them dangerous. Now, Zhongzia's sword technique looked restrained, but it made Zhou feel extreme danger. If the Zhongzia of the past was said to be a ferocious demon who bared his fangs and brandished his claws, then the current him was an elegant and beautiful demon from hell. They looked harmless, but they had the ability to make people wish they were dead. After that strike, Zhongzia slowly walked on the surface of the lake. He walked on the lake with his bare feet, but he did not sink into the lake like those who failed. Voila! Not long after Zhongzia walked over, the water where he had been standing started to splash, and a huge creature floated up from the water. That thing was like a crystal-like octopus. Each tentacle was dozens of meters long, covered with suction cups, and its entire body was transparent. The challengers who had been pulled into the lake had likely been pulled to the bottom of the lake by it. However, it was now floating in a somersault. It was clearly dead. There was a sword mark that was as thin as a strand of hair on its head. It didn't look long, and if one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice its existence. However, it had died just like that. Instantly, the people watching the live stream were dumbfounded. Their mouths were agape for a long time. This man is really perfect. He's beautiful and domineering. If I can marry him, my life will be worth it. If I can marry him, I'm willing to shorten my life by 10 years. Don't even talk about marrying him. I'm willing to die if I have to sleep with him once. Just like how men appreciated beauties, women also like to appreciate beautiful men. And Zhongzia was undoubtedly a rare and charming man in the world. It was no wonder they were like that. On the other hand, most of the men were wondering who this man was. His swordsmanship was light, not as ingenious as Ming Xiu's, nor as overbearing as Qin Jin's. But now that they thought about it, his swordsmanship was more frightening. Just looking at it gave people goosebumps. This was the first time someone had killed the monster in the lake. It was also the first time people had seen a monster. However, no one was in the mood to study what kind of monster it was. Everyone's eyes were attracted to that unique man. They wanted to know who he was. In particular, the people from the 6 great families were about to go crazy. The appearance of Ming Xiu, Feng Qiuyan, and Qin Jun had already made them feel a strong sense of danger. Now, not only did this man make them feel a sense of danger, they desperately wanted to know who this man was. Everyone stared at Zhongzia as he walked through the fog. He walked step by step casually, and soon he passed through the fog and stepped onto the shore. The golden fruit tree was right in front of him. Zhongzia walked under the golden fruit tree. He held the sword on his shoulder with one hand and reached out with the other. Just like that, he casually plucked a golden apple. This, Ming Xiu's first strike had failed to cut down the golden apple, but he had casually plucked it. Such an ability left people speechless. They didn't know how to describe it. The scene changed to the Rubik's Cube ranking. Although many women felt that they hadn't seen enough and wanted to take a few more looks at Zhongzia, they also wanted to know who this man was. The moment the ranking appeared, for some reason, everyone looked at the top spot. Although there was no way to explain why, everyone believed that he should be ranked there. Indeed, the name at the top of the ranking changed. When people saw the name clearly, they were dumbfounded. Zhou Wen's brother. Someone couldn't help but read it out loud. The 4 words were very simple. There was a name inside, but everyone knew that the owner of this name wasn't that devilishly handsome man. The people of the Zhou clan. Have they taken all the beauty in the world? No wonder they're so awesome. He's Ming Xiu's uncle. The Zhou family. How amazing. How can we live like this? Is the Zhou family trying to dominate the rankings? How can you blame the Zhou family for dominating the rankings? It's clearly the other families who are cowards and don't dare to come up, all right? Just as people were discussing a frenzy, the Rubik's Cube lit up again. Another person had challenged the level, and it was another human. The first thought in everyone's mind was, could it be another member of the Zhou family? End of this chapter. Chapter 1764. This dimensional zone had appeared for a long time. When Ming Xiu plucked the golden apple, there were only 5 golden fruits left on the tree. Ming Xiu, Feng Xiuyan, Qin Zhen, and Zhong Zia had plucked 4. This was the last golden fruit. Seeing another human attempt the challenge, everyone felt very pleased. Regardless of whether he was from the Zhou family or not, it didn't matter as long as he was plucked by a human. At the very least, the remaining 5 golden apples had been taken by humans, wiping away the previous decline. Who is this person? Why are all the people going up today unfamiliar faces? I really don't think I've seen this before. It's another new young expert. From the looks of it, Earth really has many hidden talents. There's so many young experts. I wonder if it's another member of the Zhou family. I have a hunch that this person is also a member of the Zhou family. Another unfamiliar face. It's definitely a member of the Zhou family. What do you know? All of you are only staring at whether that person is a member of the Zhou family. None of you understand the truly important things. You understand. What do you think is important? Haven't you realized that this is the last golden apple? If this golden apple is plucked, the Rubik's Cube battle will likely end. Then, the person ranked first will obtain the reward. The rewards for the planets from before were all planetary companion beasts. Then, this is a dimensional zone. What will the reward here be? Now that you mention it, it seems so. The last golden apple is going to determine first place. In that case, if nothing unexpected happens, first place will definitely be obtained by us humans. It's either Zhou Wen's brother or this young man. Zhou Wen couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the man go up. It was Lu Yun, whom he hadn't seen in a while. Lu Yun was known as God Thief. He had many means to change his appearance, but this time, he didn't change his appearance. Instead, he entered the Rubik's Cube with his true appearance. However, it was obvious that this fellow had dressed up meticulously. He was dressed in a gorgeous robe that looked like something a monk would wear. He looked mysterious, holy, and solemn. He even dyed his hair gray, and his usual cheeky expression was gone. Instead, it was replaced by a solemn expression. At first glance, he really did look like a noble person. What's this fellow thinking? Is his brain damaged? Zhou Wen was somewhat speechless. He, the holy thief, had stolen a lot of things from various big clans. Once his true face was discovered, he was afraid that it would be difficult for him to go around with his true face in the future. Once he showed his face, he would be hated by everyone. Fortunately, there are not many people in the big families who had seen Flowing Cloud's true face. There were even fewer who knew that Flowing Cloud was Holy Pirate. Lu Yun changed from his usual nonsensical behavior to his proud and solemn expression, as though he was a high and mighty divine son. Everyone waited to see how he would clear the level, but Lu Yun stood there without moving forward. He had no intention of killing the monster in the lake. Lu Yun, who was hovering above the lake, suddenly said, "I've come personally. Why aren't you quickly offering up the fruit? Could it be that you want me to personally take it?" This sentence really shocked everyone. They looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. A person could be awesome and pretentious, but he couldn't go overboard. If he went overboard, he would become an idiot. Right now, Lu Yun was acting a little too overboard. Holy **T. Does this fellow think he's the Jade Emperor? He even got him to offer up the fruit. Is he crazy? I think there's something wrong with this person's brain. Which normal person would do this? Is this fellow here to be a joke? Everyone felt that Lu Yun was putting on an act. He was a little silly, ignoring the fact that he was a human. Even a supreme existence of the dimension wouldn't be able to order a tree to offer up the fruit. Just as everyone was prepared to watch a good show and see how Lu Yun would end things, they saw a look of anger appear on Lu Yun's face. He shouted coldly, "From the looks of it, you want me to do it personally?" Just as he said that, Lu Yun extended his hand and grabbed at the fog in front of him. He didn't move at all after entering. He remained standing in his original spot. His grab looked like a joke, rendering the spectators speechless. They felt that he was definitely crazy. However, in the next second, everyone widened their eyes. They saw Lu Yun casually grab, and a golden apple appeared in his palm out of thin air. He held it firmly in his fingers. "You want me to do it personally? How troublesome." As Lu Yun muttered to himself, the Rubik's Cube screen turned to the Rubik's Cube ranking. Instantly, the spectators fell silent. If Zhong Zia's performance was still within their understanding, then Lu Yun's performance had far exceeded their understanding. They didn't know how to describe their feelings. "This is too sick. What happened just now? That works too? Is that fellow really the Jade Emperor?" Just as everyone was astonished, the rankings changed again. A new name replaced second place. Zhou Wen's brother. Holy sh*T, no wonder he's so strong. So he's Zhou Wen's brother. What's with this ranking? Why do I feel that this brother is stronger than the one from before? He should be ranked first, right? I also think this one is stronger, but they're all family anyway. It doesn't matter who's first or last. Are all the people from the Zhou family so powerful? I'm afraid the Zhou family will become the #1 faction on Earth in the future. This is way too powerful. The 6 families are nothing in front of the Zhou family. I wonder how strong Zhou Wen is. Unfortunately, there's no more golden apple. Otherwise, I can see how strong Zhou Wen is. I wonder how many brothers like him Zhou Wen has. Zhou Wen hadn't done anything, but his name had become famous in the Federation. Many people were discussing Ming Xiu and company, but the most discussed person was Zhou Wen himself. Although he hadn't done anything, it was precisely because he hadn't done anything that people wanted to know what kind of existence he was to have so many experts accompanying him. However, what was strange was that all the golden apples had been plucked, but the Rubik's Cube battle hadn't ended. One could still continue entering the Rubik's Cube. The dimensional zones are indeed not that simple. Just plucking the golden apple won't result in the final victory. Zhou Wen had long expected this, so he didn't find it strange. Do you want to know why it hasn't ended? Tracking, who had been standing by the side with a complicated expression, suddenly said, "You know?" Zhou Wen looked at Tracking. "Of course. It's just that I'm afraid you won't dare attempt the challenge, even if I tell you," Tracking said with curled lips. "Tell me about it." Zhou Wen looked at Tracking with interest. Chapter 1765. The golden fruit tree isn't the end point, Tracing said. That's strange. Since the golden fruit tree isn't the end point, why did the Rubik's Cube automatically end the battle after plucking the golden apple? Zhou Wen asked, "What do you think that place is? It's not a trashy dimensional zone like in your Earth's universe, but a dimensional zone of another dimension." Tracing continued disdainfully. There's no teleportation array in the Lake of Oblivion. The only way to leave is to pluck the golden fruit. You ignorant humans, do you really think that the dimension only has those on the rankings? In fact, those fellows are nothing but unimportant people in the dimension. There are too many experts who can pluck the golden fruit. The reason why there are still golden fruits is because they are left to be used when truly exploring the Lake of Oblivion. However, they have all been plucked by ignorant humans like you. Now, unless you can truly clear the level, there's no way to leave the Lake of Oblivion. It sounds like the dimension doesn't know much about the Lake of Oblivion. The dimension only learned of what you said not long ago, right? Zhou Wen said indifferently. Tracing didn't deny it. All he did was curl his lips and say, "Even in the dimension, the Lake of Oblivion is a famous existence. Many people know of it, but not many people dare to explore it." "Why?" Zhou Wen asked curiously. Because that's where the tomb of the fallen god is, Tracing said. I never expected the dimension to have gods, Joan said with a smile. The creatures of the dimension were no different from gods to humans. Furthermore, many of the races in the dimension had races like ghost immortals. Joan was somewhat surprised that there was the concept of God in a place like theirs. Humph, the gods of the dimension and the gods of you humans are two completely different concepts. To you humans, gods are just a form of spiritual belief and not a real existence. In the dimension, gods are only a race, not the ethereal things you humans imagine. Ever since Tracing became Zhou Wen's disciple, he felt uncomfortable looking at him. His words were even more biting than before. Then, the tomb of the fallen god is where the Celestials bury their clansmen? In that case, the Celestials must know that place very well. Why don't they clear it themselves? Zhou Wen voiced his doubts. If the Protoss aren't extinct, why would that place be called the tomb of the fallen gods? Trace briefly explained what had happened. The Celestials were originally a very powerful race in the dimension. They were existences that could match the immortals. The two races fought for supremacy in the dimension and were evenly matched for a long time. But suddenly, one day, the birthplace of the god race was suddenly destroyed. The god race also died out. Now almost no god race survived. As for how the god race was destroyed, there was still no accurate explanation to this day. The most accepted explanation was that they were destroyed by the immortals, but the immortals had never admitted to this, so no one could be certain of the truth. Many races in the dimension knew that it used to be an extremely majestic divine mountain. The divine mountain was almost comparable to a world. It could accommodate all living things, and there were countless magical items inside. However, during that night, the divine mountain disappeared without a trace. The place where the divine mountain used to be became a lake of unfathomable depth. Later, many experts from various races entered the lake, wanting to find out the secret behind the divine race's annihilation. In the end, none of them returned. Not a single creature was able to return. The land of oblivion referred to the land where the divine mountain had sunk. It also meant that all living things would sink. No creature dared to enter it. If not for the magic cube activating the battle in the land of oblivion, the experts of the dimension probably wouldn't have dared to enter it. The understanding of the land of oblivion wasn't much better than that of humans. They had only realized that the golden fruit was only a tool to leave the land of oblivion after analyzing the challenge. It wasn't the true key to the land of oblivion. Even experts at the apocalypse stage weren't willing to risk entering the land of oblivion. Otherwise, how could humans have the chance to pluck the golden fruit? Now that you know the true secret of the land of oblivion, do you still dare challenge it? Trace provoked Zhou Wen. Now that you say that, I really don't dare, Zhou Wen said with a smile. Humph. Trace was a little infuriated, but he also knew that it was indeed forcing Zhou Wen to challenge the trial now. Even the big shots of the dimension didn't dare take the risk. If a human like Zhou Wen were to challenge the trial while facing certain death, as long as there was nothing wrong with his brain, he definitely wouldn't choose to do it now. Do you dare? Zhou Wen returned with a question. So what if I don't dare? It's not like I'm his teacher, Trace snapped. That's perfect. As your teacher, I'll teach you something today, Zhou Wen said. You want to challenge the land of oblivion now? Trace stared at Zhou Wen with widened eyes, as though he was looking at a fool. That's right. To be your teacher, I naturally have to teach you things you don't know. Otherwise, how can I be your teacher? Zhou Wen said with a smile. Of course, he didn't really want to teach Trace anything, nor would he risk his life for it. The reason he chose to challenge the trial now was because he had seen something in the land of oblivion. Previously, Zhou Wen hadn't paid much attention to the land of oblivion, but this time, when Ming Xiao and company challenged the trial, Zhou Wen watched very seriously. Especially when Ming Xiao challenged the trial, Zhou Wen was somewhat worried. Although he had already taught Ming Xiao and company the method to pluck the golden apple, he still had some qualms, even if he was 100% confident. Therefore, Zhou Wen watched very seriously. It was also because of this that he saw something that he originally believed couldn't exist in the dimension. It was a tiny palm symbol on the golden fruit tree. It was the symbol of the cell phone's download dungeon. It was somewhat surprising that the dimension would have a tiny palm symbol. The origins of the cell phone were more mysterious than Zhou Wen imagined. Even the dimension had its symbol, so Zhou Wen couldn't imagine what kind of existence the person who created the cell phone was. After Qin Zhen cleared the trial, Zhou Wen had wanted to take a picture of the tiny palm symbol, but Zhong Zia and Lu Yun had beaten him to it. However, it didn't matter. As long as he downloaded the tiny palm symbol and attempted the trial in-game, he could still come out unscathed with experience. Of course, there was a more important reason why Zhou Wen was so confident. He realized that the Sigh of the King was more powerful than he had imagined. This was also his confidence and guarantee. I don't know if I should call you ignorant or fearless. If you wish to die, I won't stop you. Don't blame me if you die. I didn't force you. From Trace's point of view, Zhou Wen was basically sending himself to his death if he really went. End of this chapter. Chapter 1766. Zhou Wen didn't say anything else as he walked towards the cube. It's been a long time since I've tried entering the cube. Zhou Wen stood on the cube and felt somewhat wistful. If he had a choice, he would rather play games than take the risk himself. However, the dimensional zone, this time, had a different meaning. If he could download it, it would be of great help to his understanding of the dimension in the future. As the cube lit up, Zhou Wen's figure vanished from it. It's Zhou Wen. When the host, Su Yi, saw Zhou Wen's figure appear in the lake of fog, he immediately shouted. This shout of Zhou Wen seemed to have a great magical power that attracted everyone's attention. Due to Ming Xiu and company, everyone in the Federation wanted to know what Zhou Wen looked like and what kind of person he was. They were just too curious. Their first impression wasn't stunning. So many people were somewhat disappointed. Zhou Wen looked rather quiet and handsome, but he wasn't as manly and wild as Zhong Zia. He didn't look as noble as Lu Yun, who looked like a son of God. He didn't even look as youthful as Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyan. Zhou Wen gave people the feeling that he was an ordinary person who looked rather upright and handsome. If one had to point out an advantage, it would be that his figure wasn't bad. His slender and muscular body gave off a streamlined feeling, and he didn't have exaggerated muscles. Nonsense! And Tianzhua slammed his hand on the table. His expression was very ugly. Previously, when Ming Xiu and the others tried to break through, there were still golden fruits, so there wasn't too much risk. But now the golden fruits had all been plucked. No one knew what would happen if they entered now. Even getting out of there was a problem. He's getting cocky with just a little achievement. How can he do great things in the future? And Tianzhua was vexed, so his tone was naturally very unpleasant. Overseer, don't worry too much. With Feng Qiuyan and company scouting the way, young Master Wen should know what to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone. And Sheng consoled. Who's his brother? Do those things deserve to be his brother? And Tianzhua was even angrier. How can those idiots be called scouting the way? That's more like a dead end. Only that brat can have friends who deserve to be shot. And Sheng didn't dare continue as he muttered in a voice that only he could hear, You deserve it. What did you say? And Tianzhua glared at him. I say, young Master Wen only has you as his brother. Those two fellows shamelessly impersonated him. It's too much, and Sheng hurriedly said indignantly. Who's his biological brother? Would I, and Tianzhua, have such an idiot younger brother? And Tianzhua snorted coldly, then changed the topic and continued. Go and bring me the individual combat uniform that I've been researching recently. Overseer, what do you want? And Sheng was immediately alarmed. Nothing. Can I just take it out for a look? And Tianzhua said coldly. Ah, Sheng, you've been talking more and more recently. Do my orders need your approval? Overseer, how would I dare? I'll go get it now. And Sheng hurriedly bowed and retreated. However, he prayed inwardly, Please don't let anything happen to young Master Wen. Otherwise, it'll be fun. I might even lose one. Zhou Wen floated above the lake's surface and felt his body being suppressed by a strange force. This feeling wasn't unfamiliar. In the past, when he was still weak, he had once come to a dimension. The dimension was filled with such powers. Creatures below the mythical stage had no room to survive in the dimension. It was impossible for them to even see what this world looked like. The humans on Earth could see the Lake of Oblivion because the Magic Cube's broadcast had blocked the interference of this power. There was no such benefit when one was in it. However, with Zhou Wen's current level, such power naturally couldn't do a thing to him. Due to the existence of tracing, Zhou Wen didn't use any other identities. It wasn't appropriate to use some things, so after some thought, he summoned a companion beast. The companion beast Zhou, when summoned, was demonic neonate, who had just woken up from her slumber. The last time Zhou Wen dug out the mysterious phone's charger from the ancient well, he also discovered skeleton. The skeleton wore a purple crystal pendant. After demonic neonate swallowed the purple crystal, she entered an evolutionary state and couldn't be summoned. It was only when Zhou Wen was teaching Ming Xiu and company that he sensed a mental connection with demonic neonate. The evolved demonic neonate had already reached the calamity grade. Demonic neonate, calamity, evolvable, life providence, son of dimension life soul, supreme, true, demon wheel of destiny. One revolution terraform, great demon king, S-grade, calamity domain, infernal domain, heaven realm, new world, demon world strength. 1,000 speed. 1,000 constitution. 1,000 essence energy. 1,000 talent skill. Demonic sword. Heaven shrouding bell. Swan a companion form. None the mystic Thearch's peak calamity stats were all 999. This already amazed Zhou Wen, believing that it was the peak of calamity creatures. It was impossible for there to be any higher stats. However, demonic neonate had actually evolved to the heaven realm. Furthermore, she had all 1,000 stats, a little more than the mystic Thearch. More importantly, demonic neonate had a new ability from the new world. He didn't know what it was for. According to his previous experience, demonic neonate had a calamity domain at the terror grade. Then, the new world ability that the calamity grade demonic neonate possessed was probably an ability that only an apocalypse had. Demonic neonate was also an important source of confidence for Zhou, one to dare enter to take pictures. Demonic neonate's image didn't change much. She was still a purple-dressed girl with a demonic sword in her arms. However, the heaven-shrouding bell and Swana had vanished. It was unknown where she had hidden them. When everyone saw Zhou Wen summon a companion beast in the form of a human girl, they found it novel. Although the few humans who had succeeded in clearing the stage had also used companion beasts, they had all appeared in the form of weapons or armor. Their main combat strength was still the humans themselves. Zhou Wen directly summoned his companion beast in its original form. He probably planned on using it as his main combat strength. This was the first time he had seen it. As more and more guardians and spokespersons appeared, the effects of human companion beasts seemed to weaken. Very few companion beasts could compete with top spokespersons. In such situations, the chances of companion beasts appearing were decreasing, especially top-notch battles that were purely led by companion beasts. Many people were looking forward to knowing what kind of abilities Zhou Wen's cute and cold humanoid companion beast had. After demonic neonate came out, she floated beside Zhou Wen. Looking at the lake, the demonic sword in her arms suddenly jumped out of its scabbard and plunged into the lake. Chapter 1767. The tiny demonic sword rushed into the lake without any ripples. Moments later, the lake's surface suddenly rippled as the monster floated up with its belly turned upside down. With the death of the octopus-like monster, the fog above the lake of fog dissipated, revealing the clean lake surface and the island and golden fruit tree not far away. What a powerful companion beast! Holy sh*t. It's fine if the people around Zhou Wen are so strong, but even his companion beasts are so strong. I'm begging for the origins of this companion beast. Can a companion beast be this strong? Demonic neonate's first appearance stunned the entire Federation. It had been a long time since they had seen such a powerful companion beast appear. It comforted the people who were already doubting the abilities of companion beasts. However, people were still puzzled. Without the golden apple, what could Joan do even if he arrived in front of the golden fruit tree? Could it be that he had to dig up the golden fruit tree? Joan walked towards the golden fruit tree with demonic neonate. There weren't any other dangers along the way, so he successfully reached the shore and arrived in front of the golden fruit tree. Everyone stared at Joe to see what his plans were. What could he do now that the golden apple was gone? In the next second, everyone widened their eyes. They saw Joe take out a phone and take photos of the golden fruit tree. It didn't look like he was challenging a level, but more like a tourist who had arrived at a tourist attraction and was taking photos of it as a souvenir. The dimensional zones that originally left people feeling perilous suddenly didn't seem that dangerous. Is he challenging a level or traveling? People couldn't help but have such a question arise in their minds. Joe took a few photos of the golden fruit tree. In fact, it was just for show. What he really needed was to take a picture of the tiny palm symbol on the golden fruit tree. As the tiny palm symbol was taken, the phone screen displayed the words "dungeon loading." It made Joe feel much more at ease. I can indeed download dungeons. Could it be that the origins of the phone are related to the dimensional zones? Joe thought to himself. As he thought about this, he didn't stay idle. He summoned another companion beast. It was Empyrean Lord Behemoth that he hadn't used in a long time. It had barely reached the threshold of the calamity grade, so it was naturally not as powerful as demonic neonate. However, Emperor Behemoths were very suitable for manual labor. When the crowd saw the majestic Emperor Behemoth appear, they immediately thought of something. They could not help but think, is he really going to dig away the golden fruit tree? Very soon, their doubts were answered because the Emperor Behemoth really began to dig at the roots of the tree. Its huge and sharp claws grabbed at the roots of the golden fruit tree. With a clang, Empyrean Lord Behemoth's powerful claws only left a white mark on the tree root. It wasn't even considered damage. Joan wasn't surprised. He ordered Imperial Lord Behemoth to dig the soil beside the tree roots. Although he didn't dig deep, he had obvious results. He dug out some soil. Damn, he's really going to dig up the golden fruit tree. This is really a ruthless person. Others are just plucking an apple, but he's really good. He doesn't even let go of a tree. What's the difference between this and digging up someone's ancestral grave? Too ruthless, but I like it. Everyone discussed as their attention was focused on Imperial Lord Behemoth. They want to know if Imperial Lord Behemoth could dig up the golden fruit tree. No one paid any attention to Zhou, who was playing with his phone. Zhou held the mysterious phone and kept an eye on the progress of the download dungeon. Getting Imperial Lord Behemoth to dig up the tree was just to divert the attention of others. He didn't believe that digging up the tree would really allow him to clear the dimensional zone. His phone kept showing the download screen. Zhou didn't know when the download would be completed, so all he could do was pretend to be calm as he watched Imperial Lord Behemoth dig the tree. He didn't wish for Imperial Lord Behemoth to dig too quickly. If he really dug up the tree, he wouldn't know what to do next. Without using his phone to investigate the situation behind the dimensional zone, Zhou didn't dare casually head back. Thankfully, the soil beneath the golden fruit tree was terrifyingly hard. The calamity-grade Imperial Lord Behemoth was known for its strength, so it could only dig out a small amount of soil each time. At this rate, it would probably take half a day to dig out the golden fruit tree along with its roots. Time ticked by as everyone stared at the screen. However, after watching for 2 to 3 hours, it was still the scene of Imperial Lord Behemoth digging the tree. It made many people sleepy. I can't take it anymore. I'll sleep for a while. Wake me up when he's done digging. From the looks of it, it will take at least a few hours to dig out the tree. I'll sleep for a while too. Many people went to sleep first. After watching so many humans clearing the level and digging the tree for so long, it would be strange if they weren't sleepy. Zhou was also anxious. After downloading for so long, it was still the download screen. Suddenly, Zhou heard a clang that sounded like metal clashing. He was immediately given a fright as he hurriedly looked at Imperial Lord Behemoth, who was digging the tree. With this look, he discovered something amiss. Imperial Lord Behemoth had already dug half a meter deep into the soil under the tree, revealing a black object that was completely different from the soil. The sound of metal clashing was produced when Imperial Lord Behemoth's claws touched the black object. The spectators were also attracted by the loud sound. They also saw the black object and were puzzled as to what it was. Zhou carefully observed for a while and could only tell that the object resembled metal and stone. Only a small portion of it was revealed, and most of it was still buried in the soil. Seeing that the object didn't seem to pose any threat, Zhou ordered Imperial Lord Behemoth to continue digging along the black object. It wasn't that Zhou didn't want to dig up the black object directly, but that the object's hardness was in no way inferior to the golden fruit tree. Imperial Lord Behemoth's claws couldn't leave a mark on it at all. It was impossible to forcefully tear through it. The black object was bigger than Zhou had imagined. Imperial Lord Behemoth dug along the black object, and the more it dug, the bigger it became. It was as though the soil was filled with a black object that was neither metal nor stone. There was no end to it. After digging for a few hours, he failed to reach the end. Instead, he dug out the surroundings of the golden fruit tree. Now, he could clearly see that the golden fruit tree was rooted in the black object. It was impossible to dig out the golden fruit tree with its roots unless the black object was shattered. From the looks of it, it's impossible to dig out the golden fruit tree with its roots. The spectators could also tell that Zhou was in a predicament as they waited for his next move. Chapter 1768. Zhou looked at the black object beneath him with a slight frown. Before he could take action, the demonic sword in demonic neonate's arms automatically flew out. The tiny demonic sword charged straight for the roots of the golden fruit tree and stabbed into it. The tough golden fruit tree was pierced by the demonic sword. The demonic sword rushed in like a drill and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Only cracking sounds could be heard from the hole as powder splattered out. When did the demonic sword's offensive strength become so strong? Zhou was alarmed. When demonic neonate first obtained the demonic sword, it wasn't that powerful. Now, it had such immense strength. Even the calamity-grade Empyrean Lord Behemoth couldn't injure the golden fruit tree, but it was easily pierced through by the demonic sword. And this was the demonic sword's own strength, not demonic neonate's augmentation. From the looks of it, the demonic sword's strength can also grow with demonic neonate's growth. Zhou was very envious of demonic neonate's ability. Zhou was only envious, but the spectators were already speechless from shock. The destructive power displayed by the demonic sword was truly unbelievable. Boom! Before long, there was a loud bang. The golden fruit tree that was rooted in the black substance began to crack from its roots. The entire tree collapsed and fell to the side of the ground. After the golden fruit tree collapsed, a pitch-black hole appeared where it had been. It led straight down, but the bottom couldn't be seen. It was pitch black like a bottomless abyss. Could it be that I really got lucky and found the crux of this Yuan domain? Zhou was alarmed. He had only dug the tree to stall for time, but who knew that he would really make a discovery? So there's another world beneath the golden fruit tree. Zhou did dig the tree for a reason. Professor Gu, what do you think is in that cave? Su had completely misunderstood Zhou's intentions, but her point of view was the same as most people's. Everyone believed that Zhou had long determined the existence of the hole. I don't know. Everything is unknown, Professor Gu said with a heavy expression. Professor Gu said with a solemn expression. If he had used the aliens as a reference when he was clearing the trial previously, then everything that Zhou has encountered now is an unknown. The difficulty is incomparable to before. I only hope that he can return safely. Many people watching the program stared at the screen nervously. Just as Professor Gu had said, every step Zhou took now was a challenge to the unknown. It was even more nerve-wracking than the previous battles where the outcome was already known. Zhou glanced at the hole and had no intention of entering. He wanted to stall for time. No matter what, he had to wait for the phone to finish downloading the dungeon. He didn't move, but demonic neonate moved. She jumped into the bottomless abyss. Zhou was alarmed. He wanted to summon demonic neonate back, but it was already too late. After the demonic infant jumped into the hole, the connection between them was immediately severed. He could only sense the demonic infant's existence, but he was unable to communicate with it spiritually. After some thought, Zhou summoned Imperial Lord Behemoth back and jumped in. With his understanding of demonic neonate, she wouldn't be stupid enough to send herself to her death. There might not be any danger below, as he imagined. That brat. He's simply a brainless brute. And Tianzuo's lungs were about to explode from anger. He didn't even do the most basic investigation and probing before jumping down directly. This was simply courting death, and Sheng didn't dare say a word. He didn't know how to explain on Zhou Wen's behalf. Such actions were indeed too rash. Besides, he's still too young. He was blinded by his previous successes. He didn't even do the most basic reconnaissance work and jumped down just like that. Professor Gu couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. This time, even many of Professor Gu's anti-fans felt that what he said made sense. From the looks of it, Zhou Wen's choice was indeed too rash. Unbeknownst to them, Zhou Wen had no other choice. He couldn't let demonic neonate take the risk herself. As Zhou Wen jumped into the hole, the scene on the Rubik's Cube fell into darkness. This lasted for a long time before it suddenly lit up. As the light was too blinding, it was difficult for his eyes to accept it. All he felt was a dazzling light in front of him, preventing him from seeing anything. After a while, his eyes gradually adapted to the blinding light before he gradually saw the scene clearly. The scene that greeted him was shocking. It was a huge palace that was many times grander than a human's palace. Every pillar was 1,000 feet tall, and all sorts of equipment were astonishingly large. Even the first step of the palace's stairs was more than 10 meters tall. At the end of the stairs was a throne that was nearly 100 meters tall. Sitting on it was a humanoid creature wrapped in golden armor. The creature looked very human, but its body was far larger than a human's. In front of the huge palace and creature, Zhou Wen and demonic neonate were as tiny as ants. Even the humans watching the battle through the live broadcast couldn't help but feel insignificant. Suddenly, the golden giant on the throne opened his eyes. His eyes were as blue as the sea, and on his forehead there was a vertical eye with a golden pupil. The three eyes stared coldly at Zhou Wen and demonic neonate, as though a god was looking down on mortals. Ordinary people only felt that the golden armored giant's aura was astonishing, like a god fiend. However, the dimensional experts watching the battle felt their hearts palpitate as they nearly cried out. Three-eyed god. Her mental fortitude clearly couldn't compare to those old monsters as she blurted out. What's a three-eyed god? Li Xian asked her. That's the legendary god race that perished overnight. That golden vertical eye is proof of the god race's noble bloodline. I never expected the god race to not be completely extinct. There's still a pure-blooded god living in this world. Her expression was complicated as she continued. Zhou Wen probably won't be able to return. The dimensional races aren't that impressive. It's not like old Zhou hasn't killed them in the past. What's so impressive about a god? Li Xian curled his lips and said, What do you know? The golden vertical eye is the noblest bloodline in the god race. It's a natural expert with unparalleled strength. It's an extremely rare existence among the gods. It's an existence that can fight the strongest experts of many alien races. How can a mere human be a match for it? Zhou Wen will definitely die, her tracking said with certainty. Don't tell me you're trying to say that that thing is at the apocalypse stage? Li Xian asked with a trembling voice. It's not just at the apocalypse stage. Even among the apocalypse stage, the three-eyed god is the strongest existence. Back then, it was an existence that could fight the immortals at their peak. Her tracking sighed. End of this chapter. Chapter 1769. There are indeed survivors of the three-eyed divine. Holy Lord Trajectory wasn't surprised to see the three-eyed divine. Back then, the Celestials had been destroyed overnight along with the Divine Mountain. Even the immortals at their peak didn't have such an ability. There was definitely something fishy going on. However, after so many years, no one had been able to figure out the truth. Now that the golden three-eyed divine had appeared, Holy Lord Trajectory wanted to use this opportunity to understand the truth behind the Celestials' disappearance. The other alien factions had the same thoughts as they paid attention to the magic cube's image. However, from their point of view, a mere human was bound to die. It was impossible for him to stir up any trouble in front of the three-eyed divine with the golden vertical eye. The only thing they were interested in was how the three-eyed divine would kill Zhou. From this, they could tell how much of the three-eyed divine's strength from back then. The instant Zhou saw the three-eyed divine, he felt like he had been tricked by a child. His first thought was to immediately flee, but the temple seemed to be sealed by some special force. He couldn't use spatial skills to leave. It wasn't an ordinary taboo law. Otherwise, sure, you would definitely have been able to crack it. According to Zhou's experience, the power was likely a very pure power. It was so pure that other power factors couldn't exist within it. Therefore, in such a pure power domain, unless one's strength could break through the purity of the power, no ability could be used. Little infant, oh infant, you really screwed me this time. Zhou attempted to retreat, but his body wasn't restrained. The omnipresent, pure power that filled the entire temple suppressed all abilities, but didn't affect Zhou's body at all. This strange characteristic left Zhou amazed. However, he didn't have the time to study this. All he wanted was to stay as far away from the three-eyed divine as possible. Even if he couldn't leave the temple, it was better to stay as far away from him as possible. The aura emitted by the three-eyed divine made him feel extreme danger. Although he couldn't determine the exact strength level of the three-eyed divine, Zhou had a strong feeling that he was in existence at the apocalypse stage. He reached out to grab demonic Neonate's tiny hand, hoping to pull her back with him. However, demonic Neonate had no intention of retreating. She stood there motionless as she stared at the three-eyed divine. Under everyone's gaze, the three-eyed god slowly stood up. When he was sitting there, he already had a very oppressive aura. After he stood up, that aura became even more terrifying. Even though he was just watching in front of the live broadcast screen, it felt like he was a god king who ruled over everything. It was as if a casual glance from him could destroy all living things. Zhou's heart leaped to his throat, but no matter how hard he pulled, demonic Neonate remained motionless. She continued looking at the three-eyed divine. Is this child stupid? That shouldn't be the case. Zhou thought to himself. No one knew demonic Neonate's personality better than Zhou. She loved hiding in the dark and launching sneak attacks. How could she not know the severity of the situation and insist on waiting for death? Could it be that the demonic infant has a plan? Zhou looked at the three-eyed divine who was slowly walking down the stairs. He gritted his teeth and stood there without moving. Little Ying, oh, little Ying, please don't kill me. Zhou knew that even if he didn't hide his strength, he only had a 1% chance of survival if he fought the three-eyed god head-on. This 1% chance was because of the Sai of the king, not because he was strong enough to survive. I should have known that something would happen every time I enter a real dimensional zone. I shouldn't have come. Zhou sighed inwardly, but he could only wait for a miracle to happen. He's just a mere human. Is it worth it for such a noble god to kill him? Could it be that the three-eyed god's strength has already weakened to such an extent? Holy Lord Trajectory frowned slightly. He wasn't the only one who thought so. Basically, all the alien experts who knew of the god's former glory believed that the three-eyed god's standing up and walking down was beneath his dignity. The golden three-eyed god was also one of the pinnacle combat strength in the apocalypse. To kill creatures under the apocalypse, he didn't even need to move a finger. All he needed was a thought. Even if there were millions of living beings under the apocalypse, they would definitely be reduced to ashes. Upon seeing the golden three-eyed god get up and walk down, the alien experts believed that his strength was probably extremely weak. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to do such a thing. Ordinary humans didn't know how terrifying the golden three-eyed god was. They were all discussing how Zhou Wen would kill the three-eyed god. I wonder if the city lord will take action personally this time, or will he get that adorable companion beast to kill the golden giant? Many people were discussing this question in front of Guide City's Rubik's Cube. Clearly, they were very confident in Zhou Wen. If his 3 students could easily enter the rankings, how bad could Zhou Wen's teacher be? Ignorant human, Zhou Wen is doomed. Tracing snorted coldly. She wasn't convinced that she had taken Zhou Wen as her master, so she refused to address him as her teacher. However, what she said came from the bottom of her heart. Young lady, don't think that the giant is very strong just because he's tall and big. Among the monsters City Lord Zhou has killed, there are many bigger ones than him. It's nothing impressive. It'll probably take a few strikes, an elder beside her reminded Tracing with a smile. 2 or 3 strikes. I don't think there's a need for that, Tracing sneered. I think so too. Our City Lord Zhou is a godlike figure. A giant like that should only take 1 sword strike, or at most 2. The old man thought he had found a clue and agreed with him, so he chuckled and said, I think so too. Many of the townspeople also agreed, thinking that the old man was right. Most ordinary people in Guide City did treat Zhou Wen like a god. In their hearts, Zhou Wen was an invincible existence. Killing a giant should be a piece of cake for him. Go ahead and laugh. Let's see if you can still laugh when you see Zhou Wen smacked to death with a single slap. Tracing couldn't be bothered to argue with the ignorant citizens as he thought disdainfully. Is that three-eyed giant very strong? Li Xian wasn't an ordinary person. He could naturally sense that the three-eyed god was very strong, so he asked Tracing worriedly, Is it strong? You can be more confident and use an affirmative tone. Tracing finally found an opportunity as he fired off a barrage of words. At its peak, the golden three-eyed god was an unparalleled existence even in the dimension. It was almost synonymous with invincibility. As Tracing spoke, his voice suddenly came to a halt. His eyes, which were still staring at the Rubik's Cube screen, gradually widened. They were still dilating at their limits. Her eye sockets were almost unable to contain her eyeballs. End of chapter. Chapter 1770. The golden three-eyed divine slowly walked down the stairs and came in front of Zhou Wen and demonic neonate. At the same time, he pressed down with his palm. Zhou Wen's heart skipped a beat as he had the urge to draw his sword. However, demonic neonate's tiny hand tugged at him slightly, as though telling him not to be nervous. I'll believe you this once. Don't scam me, little Ying. Zhou Wen held back his urge to draw his sword as he thought to himself. When the spectators saw the golden three-eyed celestial's palm pressed down, but Zhou Wen didn't move at all, their hearts immediately leaped to their throats. However, people soon realized in surprise that the golden three-eyed divine's palm didn't land on Zhou Wen and demonic neonate. Instead, it extended in front of them. The way the golden three-eyed divine bowed and extended his hand didn't seem like a provocation. Instead, it looked like a human male inviting a woman to dance. In the eyes of the humans, this action was a little strange. But in the eyes of the big shots of the foreign races who had a deep understanding of the divine race, they were dumbstruck. Tracer's eyes were wide open, as if he had seen a ghost. Of course, she knew that this gesture was not an invitation to dance, but it was also an invitation etiquette and a unique ceremony of the Protoss. Zhou Wen was still looking at the terrifying creature in front of him, unsure of what he meant. Just as he was pondering, demonic neonate tugged at his hand and gestured for him to raise his hand to meet the golden three-eyed divine's palm. Zhou Wen knew that demonic neonate wouldn't harm him. He only hesitated for a moment before extending his hand to meet the golden three-eyed divine's gigantic palm. When the golden three-eyed divine saw Zhou Wen extend his hand, a strange glint flashed in his eyes. However, it was only a flash. His actions didn't change, nor did his palm move. Finally, Zhou Wen's palm pressed down on the golden three-eyed divine's hand, or rather, the tip of one of his fingers. The three-eyed divine was just too tall. His finger was much bigger than Zhou Wen's palm. At the instant the two palms touched, the golden three-eyed divine's body emitted a strange golden divine glow. It was like thousands of golden threads that wrapped around Zhou Wen's palm. For a moment, the golden divine light shone brightly, causing the entire screen to be covered in golden light. It was almost impossible to see the image inside clearly. God's covenant, golden three-eyed gods, and a human. How is this possible? Tracing stared blankly at the dazzling golden image, his brain unable to function. The gods were a very ancient race in the dimension. They were also a very unique existence among the many strange life forms. Since the birth of the god race, they were already at the peak of their power. They were not like the other races, who could continue to increase their power levels. The only way for the Protoss to continue to improve their strength was through the Covenant of Gods. This was a ritual or contract that only the Protoss could use. The races of the other dimensions couldn't use the Covenant of Gods. It wasn't that the Covenant of Gods was profound, but that it required the special physique of a celestial to be effective. Without a celestial special physique, it was impossible to complete the Covenant of Gods. The divine race's original physical characteristic was that of a three-eyed giant, but once the Covenant of God was established, the divine race's body would undergo a strange change. As the golden light flickered, the three-eyed god's body gradually changed. Moments later, he no longer looked like a human, and his body was rapidly shrinking. Not long after, the three-eyed god vanished, leaving only a golden trident with a very special shape in Zhou Wen's palm. The golden trident was a little similar to a halberd. It was completely made of gold, and at the intersection of the trident's blades, there was a golden gem that resembled an eye. The trident was covered in mysterious and strange patterns. It shimmered with a soul-stirring glow, as though it was a divine artifact used by God. No, it should be said that this was a divine artifact, a weapon transformed from a god. Zhou Wen held the golden trident and felt the boundless power within it that resembled an endless sea of stars. He was somewhat stunned. The golden trident's power was just too powerful. It was so powerful that Zhou Wen felt that his strength was insignificant. Without a doubt, the three-eyed god that had transformed into a golden trident was an apocalyptic existence. And such a powerful existence had actually taken the initiative to become his weapon. Or rather, it should be said that it had taken the initiative to become demonic neonate's weapon. This left Zhou Wen in disbelief. He had previously thought highly of demonic neonate's origins, but now he had no choice but to reevaluate her origins. Zhou Wen could tell that the three-eyed god's original choice was likely demonic neonate. However, because of demonic neonate's choice, the three-eyed god eventually formed an alliance with Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen could tell that, but others couldn't. They only saw the golden giant take the initiative to become Zhou Wen's weapon. Many people exclaimed in surprise, "Young lady, what did I say? Our City Lord Zhou is a godlike figure. That giant knows how powerful City Lord Zhou is and took the initiative to acknowledge him as his master, becoming his weapon." The elder who had spoken to Sun Hung said matter-of-factly. It was as though if the three-eyed god didn't acknowledge Zhou Wen as his master, it meant that he didn't acknowledge him. Sun Hung was rendered speechless. She didn't know how to refute him. In fact, she didn't even have the mood to do so. At that moment, she had yet to recover from her shock. In fact, it wasn't just Sun Hung. The experts of the 6 holy races, the immortals, the ghosts, the spirits, and the other races were all dumbfounded. They couldn't recover from their shock for a long time. When the gods were at their peak, the gods' covenant had been used before. However, most of them were low-level gods who used the gods' covenant to form an alliance with other alien races. The gods were divided into 4 grades according to the color of their vertical eyes: green, blue, white, and gold. The green-eye god was the weakest, but they were also born at the calamity grade. The white-eye god was born at the apocalypse grade, so it was almost impossible for them to form an alliance with other races, much less the strongest three-eyed god. Typically, The gods who formed an alliance with other races were mostly the green-eyed or blue-eyed god. Even so, once a green-eyed god was willing to form an alliance with other races, they would be in high demand. Unless it was an apocalypse-grade big shot, it was very rare for them to gain the favor of the green-eyed god. Of course, the big shots of the apocalypse era were not fools. The calamity-grade green-eyed race was useless to them, but after using the god's covenant, it was a weapon that could grow. Furthermore, it was a weapon with advanced intelligence. It was on a completely different level from ordinary weapons. Now, a human youth had actually been recognized by the three-eyed god and formed a god's covenant, becoming his weapon. How could they not be shocked? In the entire history of the gods, such a thing had probably never happened. End of this chapter. Chapter 1771. My dear neonate darling, I really didn't dote on you for nothing. Joan wished he could hug demonic neonate and kiss her. Just as he was secretly delighted, he suddenly felt the golden trident in his hand tremble. The golden gem on the golden trident suffused a strange glow as the tip of the trident automatically pointed in the direction of the throne. Is this for me to walk onto the throne? Joan's heart stirred as he held the trident in one hand and walked towards the throne with demonic neonate in the other. The live stream of the cube continued. The human world and dimension were paying attention to Joan's every move. When Joan arrived in front of the throne and leaped onto it, the huge temple suddenly trembled violently. Joan also wanted to sit on the throne. That would make him look more imposing, but unfortunately, the throne was too big. If he really sat on it, he would only look a little laughable. As the temple trembled, the Rubik's Cube screen's perspective slowly zoomed out. The temple became smaller and smaller on the screen. Finally, the scene returned to the golden fruit tree that had been cut off. Then it continued zooming out, allowing people to see the entire island. Now, the entire island was trembling violently as though there was an earthquake. The surrounding lake waters surged, forming waves that constantly slammed into the island. As for the island itself, it kept rising. Huge cracks appeared on the island as though it would collapse at any moment. Boom! Just as people were worried, the island began to collapse. Cracked rocks constantly fell from the elevated island and rolled into the lake. The island grew taller as it collapsed more and more violently. However, the speed at which it collapsed wasn't as fast as the speed at which it rose. The island stood above the lake like a mountain. Many of the collapsed areas revealed the black material that Joan had dug up. When the rocks outside completely shattered and fell, people finally saw that the black material was the island's true appearance. Or rather, it wasn't an island at all, but a black mountain. The entire lake was filled with rocks that had fallen from the mountain. The original lake water overflowed as the mountain rose higher and higher, becoming more and more majestic. It reached above the clouds and looked down at the endless sea of clouds. At the peak of the mountain, a huge palace slowly appeared. The divine mountain where the god race disappeared. Trace was stunned by this series of changes. He just stared blankly at the black divine mountain. The mountain passed through layers of clouds and mist, rising to an unknown height. It stood high above the clouds. The huge and mysterious palace emitted a strange and gentle halo, as if it was a soul palace independent of the world. When the sacred mountain stopped shaking, the Rubik's Cube screen zoomed back in. It looked down at the sacred mountain from a closer angle. At this time, the crowd saw that on the sacred mountain, huge figures seemed to be burrowing out from the ground. Soon, people could clearly see that those huge figures were three-eyed giants. Although the newly appeared three-eyed giants weren't as tall as the golden three-eyed giants. Each of them was at least 100 meters tall. However, most of their vertical eyes were green, and there were quite a few blue ones as well. Only a few of them were silver-like in color. There wasn't a single one of those gigantic figures that had golden vertical pupils like the golden three-eyed giant. More and more huge figures appeared. They were everywhere on the divine mountain, so many that it was impossible to count. Soon, they covered the entire divine mountain. The towering divine mountain could no longer accommodate a large number of huge figures. More green-eyed race appeared at the foot of the mountain. After an unknown period of time, the top and bottom of the divine mountain were filled with huge figures. The plaza in front of the shrine was filled with white-eyed god race beings. Just as everyone was shocked, countless three-eyed giants suddenly knelt on one knee in the direction of the temple. They placed one hand on their chests and lowered their heads to shout in unison, "Peerless new king, thank you for coming." The shouts shook the world, and the entire dimension could hear the shocking and brilliant voice. The expressions of the experts from the various races in the dimension changed. As for the humans, most of them were surprised and delighted. They were even dancing in joy. A human was actually being worshipped as a king in the dimension. How glorious was this? Before Zhou won, everyone believed that the races of the dimension were life forms that far exceeded humans. It was impossible for humans to be compared to them. They should be grateful if they could receive a little favor. However, what Zhou had done today had completely subverted everyone's understanding. They suddenly realized that not only could humans be given resources by the races of the dimension, but they could also become supreme existences worshipped by countless powerful dimensional creatures. When had a human ever received such treatment? The humans watching the battle were long dumbfounded. Not only were the humans stunned, but even the big shots of the dimension were stunned. That was the invincible god race, a race that had once reached the peak of the dimension. To think that they would worship a human as their new king. This was something they didn't dare imagine. The new king is immortal. The god race is immortal. The thousands of gods on the divine mountain shouted in unison, their voices shaking the entire dimension. Following the earth-shaking shouts, the Rubik's Cube screen changed again, switching to the Rubik's Cube ranking. Without any suspense, the person in first place had changed. It was a simple word, Zhou. These two words and a name couldn't be any simpler, but in that short instant, they shocked the human world and the dimension. At that moment, Zhou wasn't in a good mood. He was indeed very happy when the gods were worshipping him. However, after the worship ended, the gods that filled the mountain dissipated like ashes. In the blink of an eye, only Zhou and demonic Neonate, who were holding the golden trident, were left on the divine mountain. What a scam! Zhou, who was standing on the throne, finally reacted and let out a wail. The gods that filled the mountain weren't real gods at all. They were just illusions condensed from unyielding will. When the new king of the gods appeared, those unyielding wills were finally freed and completely dissipated. They were satisfied with their release. But now that the entire world knew that Zhou had become the new king of the gods, wouldn't he have to face the wrath of the entire dimension? Sadly, he was still a commander without an army. A human had become the king of the gods, and the gods were once one of the strongest races in the dimension. How could the old fellows of the dimension tolerate this? Now, Zhou only wanted to know if he could leave the divine mountain and return to Earth. However, the outcome left Zhou's heart cold. The Rubik's Cube challenge had ended, but he wasn't teleported back to Earth. Instead, he stayed in the temple. Chapter 1772. Grim Demon, how did I treat you? On the divine mountain, Zhou got demonic Neonate to summon Grim Demon. She stared at him with a smile and asked, Not bad. Grim Demon stammered as he cursed inwardly. You still have the F*** cheek to ask me how you treated me? Don't you know how you treated me? Just not bad, Zhou said in a deep voice with a sullen expression. Grim Demon was alarmed as he hurriedly forced a smile and said, It's not just not bad. It's really good. It's so good that there's nothing to say. You're like a second parent. Only then did Zhou nod in satisfaction. Since you know that I'm really good to you, it's time for you to perform. What do you want? Grim Demon looked at Zhou warily. Take a look at where you are first, Zhou said. This is the divine mountain of the Celestials. Grim Demon carefully sized up his surroundings before his expression changed drastically. Why did you bring Master to such a place? Don't you know, halfway through his sentence, Grim Demon seemed to think of something and suddenly stopped. What don't I know? Joan said slowly as he looked at Grim Demon. Nothing. Grim Demon remained silent. Clearly, he was unwilling to reveal more about demonic neonate. You can say nothing, but it's best you figure out what's going on. Joan placed the golden trident in front of Grim Demon and continued. This is the only surviving celestial on the Divine Mountain. And now, he has become my weapon. As for me, I've been left on this Divine Mountain by the magic cube. I can't return to Earth. I believe you know better than me what will happen next. What did you say? This is a weapon transformed from a golden celestial. The golden celestial chose to become your weapon? Grim Demon wore a look of disbelief. Of course. It should be thanks to little Ying that he became my weapon, Joan said. What do you mean by thanks to Master? I think it's all thanks to Master. Grim Demon immediately corrected him. No matter whose credit it is, I'm now the wielder of this weapon. Furthermore, I can only stay in the dimension. Little Ying naturally can only stay here too. Now, the entire dimension knows that I've become the owner of the Divine Mountain and that I have this golden weapon. Idiot, didn't I tell you not to expose Master's existence? How can you bring her to participate in the Magic Cube battle? Grim Demon cursed in exasperation. Other than that, don't you have anything else to say? If not, wait to die with your master. Joan interrupted Grim Demon and said expressionlessly. Grim Demon was immediately speechless. His expression changed for a while before he sighed and said, You're really wrong. Even if I tell you everything about Master, it won't help your current situation at all. It might even be more dangerous. If you exposed Master because of this, then I can only say that you are really too stupid. How do you know it won't help me if you don't tell me? Joan wasn't in a hurry, as he said casually. All right, actually what I know isn't bad. However, there's one thing I can tell you for sure. The reason why the Divine Mountain and the Celestials vanished overnight has a lot to do with Master. Grim Demon said helplessly. Continue. Joan couldn't help but be secretly delighted when he saw that Grim Demon had finally relented. Joan became more and more curious about demonic neonate's origins. However, too few people knew about demonic neonate's origins. Grim Demon was definitely the one who knew the truth the best, but he was too tight-lipped. Even if Joan threatened him with his life, Grim Demon wouldn't say a word. It was rare for him to tell him about demonic neonate. Grim Demon's expression was very complicated. After a while, he said, Let me tell you a story. I'm all ears, Joan said indifferently. Once upon a time, there was a hunter who hunted for a living every day. One day, when he was hunting, he saw a wolf bite a rabbit. The rabbit was a mother who had just given birth. In its nest, there were a few cubs waiting to be fed. When the cubs saw their mothers by their nests, they crawled out of their nests and wanted to find their mothers to drink milk. However, they couldn't understand that not only was their mother in danger, but even they themselves would end up as food in the stomachs of hungry wolves. When Grim Demon said that, he stared at Joan and asked, If you were a hunter, what would you do now? Kill the wolf and save the rabbit and its children, Joan answered. All right, if the hunter saves the rabbit and its children, then the wolf will starve. Then the wolf would starve, and she could also be the mother of several pups. Without food, she and her pups would starve to death. If you knew this, would you still have saved that rabbit and those brats? Grim Demon asked again. Yes, Joan answered without hesitation. This was an unsolvable problem to begin with. From a different angle, regardless of whether Joan saved them or not, it was wrong. Therefore, he didn't need to think too much. All he needed to do was be himself. Very good. You saved the rabbit and its children. The wolf was destroyed by you, and the wolf cubs starved to death. After that, the rabbits lost their natural enemies and constantly reproduced, increasing their numbers. The original resources can no longer satisfy the rabbits' appetites and fill their stomachs. Therefore, the rabbits will form groups to eat the crops you planted, causing the crops you planted to be unharvested. You won't have any food to survive the winter. What should you choose? Grim Demon continued asking Joan questions. In that case, I made the wrong choice from the beginning. I shouldn't have saved that rabbit. Joan wasn't usually a stubborn person. Although he could use some logic to refute Grim Demon, he didn't do so. Instead, he changed his train of thought. All right, if you don't save the rabbit, there will be plenty of food after the wolf hunts the rabbits. The wolf cubs will grow up quickly and give birth to more wolves. When the time comes, there will be wolves everywhere. Not to mention hunting in the mountains. Even living in the mountains will be very dangerous. Perhaps the wolf pack will rush into your home and tear you apart. Is this the outcome you want? Grim Demon sneered. If it were an ordinary person, they would only blame Grim Demon for the problem. It was an unsolvable problem, but Joan didn't think that way. After some thought, he said, I can tame that wolf. At the same time, I can kill a certain number of rabbits with the wolf's help and maintain the number of rabbits within a certain range. This way, the rabbits won't be overrun and the wolves won't become a threat to me. Only then did Grim Demon nod. He nodded in admiration and said, I hope that when you encounter the same situation in the future, you'll be able to make the same choice as you did now and not act on impulse. And then, Joan didn't wish to discuss this with Grim Demon. He only wanted to know what Grim Demon's story had to do with demonic neonate. End of this chapter. Chapter 1773. Then, someone saved the rabbit and raised the wolf. From then on, the world became beautiful, Grim Demon said sarcastically. That's it. Joan felt that the story wasn't over. Of course not. A wolf is ultimately a wolf, not a dog. However, that's not the most terrifying thing. Sometimes, a rabbit might not really be a rabbit. That's the most terrifying thing, Grim Demon said with a sneer. It's best you finish your story. Joan had roughly figured out something. I'm done. You should be able to guess what happens next, Grim Demon said as he glanced at demonic neonate. Who's the rabbit? Joan had roughly guessed that the Celestials were probably the wolf. As for demonic neonate, or the race that demonic neonate represented, it was the hunter. As for the rabbit, Joan wasn't sure. What do you think? Grim Demon asked. Immortals? Joan guessed, but he wasn't sure. They look as cute as rabbits, but in fact, they're even more terrifying than wolves. Grim Demon didn't say it out loud, but it was already a tacit agreement. After a pause, Grim Demon continued. Now, you should understand why I've repeatedly emphasized that I can't let Master be exposed, right? Understood, but now that I've been exposed, do you think the Immortals will come here? Joan probed. That's right. I've been left in the dimension, unable to leave. In fact, it wasn't that he really didn't have the ability to leave the dimension. Even if the magic cube didn't send him back, he could still return himself. Others might not be able to do it, but Joan, who had the Mystic Tharch as a companion beast, could easily break through the spatial barrier. It wasn't difficult for him to return. He only wanted to obtain more information about demonic neonate from Grim Demon. Now, he finally knew demonic neonate's origins. It was even greater than Joan had imagined. Demonic neonate, or the race that demonic neonate belonged to, was an existence that could suppress the immortals and celestials. Perhaps not. The current immortals are no longer the original immortals. That rebellious immortal is long gone from this world. Master has also become like this. Perhaps no immortal can recognize her. Grim Demon pondered and said, However, it's best you leave immediately. It's better to be safe than sorry. Do you think this thing can fight an immortal expert? Joan said as he held the golden trident in his hand. It's hard to say. If that traitor was still around, this thing wouldn't be a threat to her. Otherwise, the Protoss wouldn't have fallen for so long. If she wasn't here, perhaps this thing could scare those fellows, Grim Demon said. Huh? Joan frowned slightly. What else do you want? Although I've been away from the dimension for a long time and don't know much about the Immortals' present strength, for them to be able to suppress the 6 sacred races again, there's no doubt that they have more than one apocalypse. You aren't at the apocalypse stage yourself. With this item's power, it's already not easy to fight an apocalypse. Do you want to fight all of them alone? Grim Demon mocked. That's true. In that case, let's return. As Joan spoke, he ignored Grim Demon's expression and unsummoned demonic neonate. As demonic neonate's weapon, Grim Demon was also stored back into the demonic sword. Damn bastard, you'll be struck by lightning sooner or later. Grim Demon realized that he had been tricked by Zhou and cursed inwardly. Zhou naturally couldn't hear his curse. Even if he could hear it, he definitely wouldn't take it to heart. He summoned the Mystic Arch to possess him as a soul and used the spatial teleportation power of the sky-stealing, sun-shifting art to instantly return to Earth. Without the Mystic Thearch's power, the sky-stealing, sun-shifting art couldn't break through the spatial barrier. He could only teleport in the dimension, making it impossible for him to return to Earth. Not long after Zhou returned to Earth, a terrifying existence tore through the sky and descended on the Divine Mountain. However, there was only an empty mountain left on the Divine Mountain. The terrifying existence scanned it for a long time, but didn't discover anything. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have been so worried. I actually allowed a human punk to obtain the golden three-eyed god. The terrifying existence frowned slightly and stared at the Divine Mountain for a moment before turning to disappear. Several extremely terrifying existences descended on the Divine Mountain one after another. However, when they saw the empty Divine Mountain, no one was interested in staying any longer. However, they couldn't help but feel regretful. After a long time, more terrifying creatures arrived on the Divine Mountain. Furthermore, there was more than one. It was a woman who looked like a fairy. The clouds beneath her feet landed on the Divine Mountain. At the same time, she flicked her sleeve and something flew out. When the item flew out of her sleeve, it looked like it was only the size of a pellet, but when it landed in front of the temple, it turned into a huge white jade pillar. The white jade pillar stood in front of the temple's door. It was almost as tall as the huge temple, as though it had grown roots. There were black metal chains wrapped around the white jade pillar. Each of the metal chains pierced through a man's body and tied him firmly to the white jade pillar. Old Joe, you really struck it rich this time. Now, there's probably no one in the entire Federation who doesn't know your name, Li Xian exclaimed excitedly when he saw Zhou return. I don't want to be so famous either, but my strength doesn't allow it, Zhou said with a smile. I gave you a ladder, but you really dared to climb it? Li Xian punched Zhou and scolded him jokingly. You still have to have the ability to climb up. Zhou turned to look at Tracking and said, My dear disciple, do you think I'm qualified to teach you now? Yes. Tracking nodded unexpectedly. His attitude was completely different from before. Previously, Zhou had been able to force back the unnamed god's will. Tracking could still console himself, believing that it was the influence of Earth's laws that made it difficult for the unnamed god to display its true strength across space. But now, Zhou was able to make the golden, three-eyed, celestial voluntarily sign the covenant of gods. This was a manifestation of absolute strength. Even an existence like the golden, three-eyed celestial was willing to become Zhou's weapon. It didn't seem shameful for her to be Zhou's disciple. Seeing that Tracking's faith had wavered, Zhou was about to say something when he saw the magic cube suddenly light up again. Someone is challenging the level again? Zhou frowned slightly. He had already taken away the valuable items in the tomb of the fallen god. He didn't understand why the magic cube would continue fighting. This time, the person challenging the level wasn't human, but an exotic beast that looked like a lion but had a body made of bronze. Unlike before, the scene of the fog lake didn't appear this time. The bronze lion directly appeared at the foot of the Divine Mountain. Its four hooves moved in unison as wind and fire seemed to rise beneath its feet. Moments later, it rushed to the peak of the Divine Mountain. What was shocking was that there were already two people on the Divine Mountain's peak, which was supposed to be empty. One was an indescribably beautiful woman, and the other was an incomparably handsome man with a pair of dragon horns on his head. His hair was as white as ice. The man was tied to a white jade pillar, and iron chains pierced through his ribs. Just looking at it would make one's flesh shake. Teacher, Zhou Wen's body trembled when he saw the man's appearance. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.